Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Pam Hupp. Pam Hupp was born on October 20th, 1958 in Delwood, Missouri, as the second child to the Newman family. She married Mark Hupp, and they had 2 children together. In 2001, the family relocated to Fallon, Missouri. Pam had a varied work history, eventually working as administrator for State Farm until 2010 when she stopped working due to back and leg pain. During this time, she started filing disability claims. On August 16, 2016 around noon, Lewis Gumpenberger, a mentally challenged man who had been struggling with mental and physical disabilities since a car crash in 2005, died after being shot 5 times by Pam Hupp in her apartment. Earlier that day, Pam called 911, reporting a robbery. According to Pam, Gumpenberger had jumped out of a vehicle driven by another person, attacked her with a knife while she was in her SUV, and she claimed she slapped the knife away with a karate chop. Pam said she then ran into her house, grabbed her Ruger LCR from the nightstand, and shot Gumpenberger 5 times in self-defense. She alleged that Gumpenberger ordered her to drive him to the bank to withdraw Russ's money, and claimed that Gumpenberger attacked her in her driveway. Russ was Russ Faria, a man wrongly convicted of murdering his wife Betsy in 2011. At the crime scene, the police found 9 $100 bills on Betsy's body, along with a handwritten note addressed to her. The note contained chilling instructions for the killer, detailing what they needed to do at Pam's apartment. Firstly, they had to retrieve Russ's money. Then they would take Pam into the house, kill her, and make it look like Russ's wife was responsible. The murderer wanted Pam's life to end in a specific way. They even specified that the knife should be left sticking out of her neck. They were willing to pay Gumpenberger a hefty sum of $10,000 for completing the task. Pam Hupp was arrested for murder. However, truth behind Gumpenberger's death emerged when Pam voluntarily visited O'Fallon police. During her interview, Pam asked if it be recorded, citing her TV appearances with KTVI's Chris Hayes, whom she blamed for attracting criminals. According to the Fallon chief of police and the prosecuting attorney of St. Charles County, Pam had lured Gumpenberger into her home by posing as a television producer named Kathy. She pretended this was for a TV show and tricked him into reenacting a 911 emergency call, providing a perfect cover for the horrific crime she was about to commit. After murdering Gumpenberger, Pam wrote a note that was later found on his body. The police were convinced that Pam was a ruthless killer due to the overwhelming evidence they discovered, including the $100 bills found on the deceased body. It was later revealed that Pam had planted these bills on Gumpenberger's body. Significantly, the 10th $100 bill was found in Pam's dresser, and its serial number was sequential with 3 of the other $100 bills found on the body. The St. Charles County Police subsequently reopened a complaint filed on August 10, 2016, by Carol Alford, who reported a woman matching Pam's description. This woman had approached Alford, offering to pay her $1,000 to participate in a fake 911 call, and was driving an SUV identical to Pam's. It emerged that Carol Alford was not the only one with a similar complaint. Brent Harleton informed the police that Pam had made him the same offer less than an hour before she shot Gumpenberger. Pam claimed in her interview that she had never met Gumpenberger before, but phone records showed that she had been at his doorstep. Further investigation revealed that Pam owned the knife she claimed Gumpenberger used to attack her, which she had purchased along with other items at a store in O'Fallon. It was also discovered that Pam had a habit of storing her knife between her kitchen counter and stove, similar to how the knife was found in her car, wedged between the passenger seat and central console. During a search of her home, police found a carpet swatch that seemed to be placed to protect her rug from Gumpenberger's blood. The police had doubts about Gumpenberger's ability to commit the crime due to his mental state, It became clear that Pam was guilty when she shot Gumpenberger, apparently trying to protect her rug from blood. On August 23, 2016, Pam Hupp was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. When she was arrested, she asked to use the restroom and then attempted to take her own life by stabbing her wrist and neck with a ballpoint pen. Fortunately, she failed. Pam made her first court appearance on January 30, 2017, where St. Charles County Assistant Prosecutor Phil Groenweg argued that her actions demonstrated a consciousness of guilt. Pam Hupp was convicted on all charges by a grand jury in December 2016 and was given a $2 million bail. Her trial began in 2017, during which she pleaded not guilty, prompting the prosecutor to seek the death penalty. They argued that she had made a decision to target Gumpenberger as her victim. In June 2019, Pam entered an Alford plea, effectively withdrawing her request for a jury trial and avoiding the death penalty. Following her guilty plea, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole in August 2019. After her sentencing, Pam called her then-husband, Matt Hupp, and admitted to killing Lewis Gumpenberger to spare their family the ordeal of a distressing trial. The trial exposed a disturbing aspect of Pam's character, revealing a shocking truth that horrified the police, judges, and the entire nation. In June 2016, Judge Cunningham ruled that evidence related to the brutal murder of Betsy Faria could be presented in court, leading to the reopening of the Betsy Faria case. Betsy Faria, born Elizabeth K. Meyer Faria, resided in Troy, Missouri, where she worked alongside Pam at State Farm as a life insurance administrator. In 2010, Betsy was diagnosed with cancer, and by October 2011, she had discovered that it had spread to her liver, leaving her with only a few months to live. Prior to her death, on December 22, 2011, Betsy altered the sole beneficiary of her $150,000 life insurance policy, replacing her husband, Russ Faria, with Pam Hupp, without informing him or their daughters of the change. Pam later claimed that Betsy had instructed her to establish a trust fund for her daughters until they came of age. However, Pam subsequently alleged that Betsy had wanted her to keep the money for herself, citing a previously undisclosed romantic relationship between the two women before Betsy's death. Betsy's daughters became suspicious and took Pam to court in 2014, but their attempt to retrieve their mother's life insurance fund from Pam and her husband Matt was dismissed by the court. In 2016, Russ took legal action against State Farm. 5 days after Betsy made Pam Hupp the sole beneficiary of her life insurance policy on December 22, 2011, Betsy attended a chemotherapy session at the Alvin J. Siteman Cancer Center, which left her weakened. Afterwards, she went to her mother's house as planned, where Russ was supposed to pick her up or she would stay overnight. However, Pam Hupp unexpectedly arrived at Betsy's mother's house and offered to drive Betsy home, claiming she dropped her off around 7 p.m. Betsy's daughter later stated that her mother missed her call at approximately 7:21 p.m. By 9:40 p.m., Russ made an emergency call to 911, frantically reporting that his wife Betsy had taken her own life. Russ spent the evening at his friend Michael Corbin's house, watching movies from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Afterwards, he drove to Arby's Lake in St. Louis before heading back home. When Russ called for help, the first responders arrived about 10 minutes later. Upon examining the scene, they immediately ruled out the possibility of suicide. Betsy's body was found lying on her right side, with 55 stab wounds and a wrist cut to the bone. A kitchen knife was lodged in her neck, and another knife was discovered under her pillow. Notably, there were no bloodstains or footprints near the entrance of the house. The estimated time of Betsy's death was determined to be between 7:20 p.m. and 9:41 p.m. Fingers pointed to Russ Faria as the main suspect after his wife's murder. Authorities believed he had a motive due to being denied $150,000. Russ was arrested a day after the murder and charged with first-degree murder, despite claiming innocence. A pair of blood-stained slippers were found in his closet, and he failed a polygraph test. The police deemed his demeanor suspicious and erratic. Russ's bail was set at $250,000, which he couldn't pay, so he was jailed until his November 18th trial. Pam told police Russ was violent, a heavy drinker, and had threatened Betsy before. With a $150,000 motive, it was easy to suspect him. Russ's trial was an extremely challenging and brutal process. According to his lawyer Joel Schwartz, Russ maintained his innocence, stating that he was with friends on the night in question, and they corroborated his alibi. Furthermore, Russ had purchased food from a store, making it practically impossible for him to have committed the crime in question. The prosecutor countered that Russ's friends were in on it, lying about his whereabouts and maybe even helping him. The judge, Christina Menem, refused to let Schwartz present evidence pointing to an alternative suspect, Pam, despite strong evidence of her motive and suspicious behavior. She claimed to have put $100,000 from insurance into a trust fund for her sister's daughters, but later admitted to keeping it for herself. She didn't want others to have it, so she implied she wanted someone else to have it. A detective reported a crime scene camera malfunction, causing key photos to be lost. Despite the odds, Russ was convicted of murder and armed criminal action, sentenced to life plus 30 years. Before Russ's retrial, her lawyer obtained the photos showing no blood trail. He's still trying to find out who sent them to him. Betsy Pam's case took a welcome turn during re-examination. At trial, her sister Camp testified that Russ was devastated when his wife removed him from her insurance policy. Russ had pressed a pillow to Camp's face. Russ's friends were accused of being accessories to murder, but no charges were filed. After 4 years in prison, Russ's attorney appealed the conviction in 2015. However, a judge rejected a review of the case in 2013. In 2014, KTVI and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch reinvestigated the case, unveiling suspicious facts about Betsy's death and the killer's identity. Pam Hupp's alibi was discredited due to contradictory statements, and it was revealed she lied about not being in the Faria home. The fact that Pam was completely forgotten about in the murder case was not only shocking to Schwartz and Russ, but some members of the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department had also been confused as to why Pam was not being investigated as a possible suspect in the case. In an interview, an officer had shared how shocked he was when no one was looking in Pam's direction. Everyone had been fixated on Russ. Media exposed prosecuting attorney ASI's effort to imprison Russ, revealing her relationships with the captain of investigations Mike Lang and a lead investigator prosecuting witness. This led to a retrial in 2015 with a new judge, Christina Menem, initially presiding. After Menem's recusal, Judge Stephen R. granted a new bench trial and released Russ on bond. Schwartz presented evidence against Pam, revealing she told police she saw Russ with another man. CSI agent Amy Buhner believed Russ's blood-stained slippers were planted evidence. Russ was acquitted in 2015 and later sued ASI and deputies for ignoring exonerating evidence and fabricating their own. Russ was surprised by the speedy exoneration. Russ won a $2 million settlement in 2020. ASI faced a bar complaint from Joel Schwartz, but it was rejected in 2016. In 2017, ASI cooperated with the U.S. Attorney's review of Betsy Faria's case and asked for an independent probe into her conduct, but was cleared of any wrongdoing. Judge Christina Menem was suspended in 2017 for misconduct. She and ASI were later voted out for mishandling the Betsy Faria murder case. In 2019, Lincoln County appointed Mike Wood as the new attorney, who reopened the case, inspired by Russ Faria's wrong conviction. After Pam Hupp's Alford plea, Wood requested a review by the major case squad. The case also motivated Rick Harold to run for Lincoln County Sheriff in 2020. Pam Hupp was questioned as a suspect in Betsy Faria's murder in July 2021. She was charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. The prosecutor sought the death penalty due to the brutal nature of the crime, which included 55 stab wounds and a severely cut wrist. Evidence against Pam included a $150,000 life insurance policy, which she claimed for herself despite promising to put it in a trust fund for Betsy's daughter. Pam Hupp claimed she and Betsy were lovers in 2021 and that Betsy wanted more than friendship. She betrayed Betsy, saying Betsy had a crush on her. Prosecutor Mike Wood thought Pam murdered Betsy, stabbing her 55 times with a kitchen knife while she slept. Pam then used her socks to spread footprints, trying to appear as domestic violence. Pam Hupp's case file linked her to Betsy Faria's murder. Despite claiming to be home by 7:20 p.m., Pam's call records showed she was still at Betsy's. Betsy's body position suggested she was killed by someone she trusted. Pam pleaded not guilty in 2022, but her trial was delayed due to her attorney's death. It's now set to begin in 2025 and last about a month. Prosecutor Mike Wood thought the case against Pam Hupp was mishandled from the start, with bias against Russ Faria in his second trial. A 2015 destruction order could have erased key evidence, luckily overlooked, ensuring Faria's release. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jessica Disson. A young girl vanished without a trace after being left home alone briefly. The events that followed seemed more like a suspenseful crime novel than a genuine case, as it was difficult to fathom such an occurrence in reality. It took a decade and a half to uncover the truth, and when it was finally revealed, the public was both outraged and stunned by the shocking details that emerged. Jessica Disson was born on May 2nd, 1982, in the small American town of Shepherdsville, Kentucky. It was a quiet place where a lot of residents were involved in farming and knew each other well. Jessica had two younger brothers, and from an early age, she helped her parents to take care of the kids while they were working. This made Jessica more independent, and her parents could always rely on her. When she was 15, she took a part-time job at a local restaurant to save up for her first car. She dreamed of a red Pontiac, and a few years later, she had saved enough money to make that dream a reality. Despite her part-time job, Jessica had excellent grades and started to make plans to attend college to become an accountant. In the fall of 1999, at the age of 17, Jessica began her final year of high school. Excited about a new relationship, she had recently started dating a boy. Friday, September 10th started like any other day. While Jessica slept, her parents left for work, and her younger brothers caught the bus to school. Jessica, who had stayed home, was expected to drive herself to school in her own car shortly after her brothers had left. Somewhere around noon, her mother returned home and immediately noticed something weird. Jessica's car was parked in front of the house, although she should have been in class at that time. The mother entered the house and went to her daughter's room. Her initial thought was that Jessica might have overslept and missed school, but she wasn't in her bedroom. Next, the mother thought that for some reason, Jessica might have asked her father for a ride to school. She called him, but he said he had gone to work alone that morning. Thinking there might be something wrong with Jessica's car, the mother took a spare key from the house to try starting it. However, as soon as she approached the car, she saw a disturbing scene. To begin with, the driver's door was ajar. Even more disconcerting was the sight of Jessica's cell phone on the seat, displaying the partially dialed emergency number 911. Under the front seat, one of Jessica's shoes and her keys were visible, while her textbooks, work attire, and purse were scattered across the back seat. Jessica's mother instantly assumed the worst-case scenario. It was apparent that someone had attempted to call 911 using Jessica's phone, but was interrupted. Furthermore, it was highly improbable that Jessica would have simply abandoned all her personal items in the vehicle and departed on foot, especially considering the family's residence was situated on the periphery of town, necessitating a lengthy trek along the road. Jessica's parents called the school only to hear that their daughter hadn't attended class. Somehow, the school had failed to notify them about this, as it should have done. A few hours later, Jessica's best friend from the restaurant where they both worked called her parents, saying that Jessica hadn't shown up for her shift, increasing their concern. Worried about Jessica's absence from school and work, and the fact that her belongings, including a phone with 911 dialed, were left in an unlocked car, her parents decided to call the police. However, the sheriff simply suggested that Jessica had probably left on her own and would eventually come home. He didn't even pay attention to the fact that one of her shoes was left in the car, which would make it difficult for her to go far without it. Jessica's parents tried to convince the sheriff that their daughter might be in danger, but despite their pleas, he refused to open an investigation, leaving them with no choice but to return home. After that, Jessica's parents decided to take matters into their own hands. They contacted relatives, friends, and acquaintances, but no one had seen her. Together, they started to search for Jessica throughout the town, but she was nowhere to be seen. The next morning, her parents went back to the sheriff and told him that Jessica still didn't make it home. This time, he dispatched 2 officers to inspect her car, but their parents faced yet another problem. The officers examined the vehicle without gloves, touching everything inside with their bare hands. They also didn't check Jessica's room, although it was standard procedure. Once again let down by law enforcement, Jessica's parents tried to get some help from the local media, drawing their attention to their daughter's disappearance and the police's lack of interest, alongside relatives and friends. They initiated their own search and also began distributing flyers with information about Jessica. The search was led by Jessica's father and his brother Stanley, who knew the area well. Fearing the worst, they decided to search the vicinity near a local river. The area had a pretty bad reputation as it was popular among local drug dealers and other criminals due to its overgrown and secluded nature. For hours, Jessica's relatives combed through the difficult terrain near the river, but found no trace of her. The next morning, something extremely weird happened. Jessica's parents were at home, and their son was playing in the yard. Suddenly, he rushed inside, claiming he heard a cry for help that sounded like his sister's voice. Jessica's father grabbed his shotgun and rushed outside, trying to locate the source of the cry. At the same time, his brother drove up to their house and quickly joined the search. Soon they noticed something. There was smoke rising from their neighbor's property, a 40-year-old man named David Brooks. As they approached, they saw him burning something that resembled clothing on his land. It looked highly suspicious, so Jessica's father asked Brooks for permission to search his farm. Brooks, however, refused and asked them to leave. This wasn't the only weird thing about Brooks. Before Jessica's disappearance, her relatives had maintained a normal relationship with him and his family. However, shortly after that, Brooks began behaving strangely. He started regularly driving slowly past their home, staring at them with an ominous smile. Jessica's parents also received mysterious phone calls where an unknown man remained silent and just breathed heavily. They suspected Brooks was behind it, but couldn't understand the reason for such behavior. After witnessing Brooks burning clothing on his property, Jessica's parents decided to once again speak to the police, who had shown little interest in the case from the beginning. They shared their observations, asking officers to visit Brooks with cadaver dogs, and they agreed. Using Jessica's clothes to track her, the dogs led them to the fire pit on Brooks's property, but no substantial evidence was found. The dogs also discovered black gloves in one of the sheds, signaling the presence of a smell associated with decomposition. Throughout the search, Brooks displayed increasingly suspicious behavior, yet the police failed to connect him to Jessica's disappearance, once again leaving empty-handed. Disappointed by the police, Jessica's father decided to reach out to the FBI. The Bureau usually refrains from initiating investigations based solely on calls from the relatives of missing persons, but this time, they decided to get involved immediately, in light of the disturbing facts presented by Jessica's parents. After thorough research, the FBI concluded that something truly horrific might have happened to her. From this point on, a real investigation began, one that local cops had been reluctant to conduct. FBI agents have taken fingerprints in Jessica's room and in her car. They have also seized all potential evidence for analysis and sent everything to the lab. Investigators have also organized an extensive ground search using helicopters and by gathering volunteers. They have thoroughly examined the bottom of the pond near Jessica's house, considering the possibility that her body might be there. FBI agents have meticulously searched Brooks' farm, and that's where they discovered something very alarming. In one of the sheds, they found a printed photo of Jessica. After this disturbing discovery, detectives were almost certain that Brooks was somehow involved in her disappearance. They also suspected his 35-year-old brother Joseph, as he behaved strangely while the police were searching his property. However, there was a problem. During the search, investigators found no evidence substantial enough to arrest the brothers. So they focused all their efforts on the search in the area, almost certain that Jessica was no longer alive. On September 27th, 17 days after her disappearance, the police received a call. A woman was driving along the road near the river where Jessica's father had searched for her in the initial days. She saw something strange near a tree just off the road and decided to inspect it. The woman came closer, realized it resembled a human body, and called the police right away. The FBI agents arrived at the scene and indeed found the lifeless body of a young woman missing some fingers and limbs. She was found with a painted rope tied to her legs, partially undressed, likely sexually abused, and decomposed beyond recognition. Her mother identified her by a small butterfly tattoo. Medical experts confirmed her identity and determined she was strangled to death, had numerous bruises, and her limbs and fingers were detached post-mortem. The most devastating fact was that she had been alive for about 3 days after her disappearance, giving the police a chance to save her, but they did nothing. After the body was found, the FBI re-interviewed Brooks and discovered inconsistencies in his story. He initially claimed to have seen Jessica the morning she disappeared, but later changed his account, saying he was home with his wife, who contradicted him. When asked about hypothetical fingerprint evidence, Brooks's suspicious response was that he'd confess. He failed a polygraph, leading to his arrest, despite a lack of solid evidence linking him to the crime. The detectives continued working on the case, searching for any additional evidence as the trial preparations unfolded. Investigators recalled another interesting detail. During the search of Brooks's car, they found a rope similar to the one used to tie the victim's legs. However, no DNA samples were found on it, making it another piece of circumstantial evidence. The trial began in January 2003. Brooks's lawyer insisted on the complete absence of evidence and declared his client's innocence. Something else came to light during the trial. When the body was discovered, investigators also found some missing limbs of the victim nearby. They placed them in special containers and handed them over to the local police. Ignoring labels that said, "Store it in the refrigerator," they left the boxes at room temperature, causing extensive decomposition. So even if there was some potential evidence, including possible DNA traces from the killer, it was lost due to this error. All other circumstantial pieces of evidence against Brooks lacked sufficient weight. Ultimately, the jurors couldn't reach a unanimous decision, so the man walked free. According to state laws, he could only be charged again if new evidence was found. For Jessica's parents, this was a devastating blow. They had almost no doubt that Brooks was behind their daughter's murder. Moreover, had the police taken their job more seriously, their daughter might have been saved. So in the end, they lost all hope of achieving justice. In the following years, this case remained unsolved, and eventually it was almost entirely abandoned. In 2012, a new detective, Lynn Hunt, joined the local police department. She was assigned to investigate unsolved cases, and her initial focus fell on the murder of Jessica Dish. Upon reviewing the case files, she was shocked by the negligence of her predecessors. Most of the documents were filled with errors, missing any reference to conversations with the involved parties, and the evidence wasn't properly documented. In other words, It was so ineffectively handled that she had to essentially start the investigation from scratch 13 years after the murder. Her first step was to speak with Jessica's family. One of her brothers, now an adult living separately from his parents, handed her a box of Jessica's belongings from her car. He had kept it since the police returned these items to the family. Once again, Hunt was astonished at how carelessly her colleagues had handled the evidence, failing to store it properly according to protocol. Now, after so many years, these items were unlikely to help her. Hunt persisted in her meticulous examination of the documents. She soon discovered an interesting detail. Brooks' medical report indicated an IQ of only 61. This called into question all the interrogations, because with such low intelligence, he may have misunderstood the questions and given inadequate answers. Hunt came to believe that this man was probably not connected to the case, his strange behavior explained by his extremely low IQ. Then, Hunt began to think about who else could have committed this murder. She extensively researched everyone involved in the case or living nearby. This went on until September 2014, nearly 15 years after Jessica's death, when a colleague from another department called Hunt to share intriguing information. An inmate from a Kentucky state prison claimed to know the real identity of Jessica Dish's murderer. Hunt approached this lead with slight skepticism. Usually, when inmates wanted to share some information with the police, it ended in disappointment and wasted time. Many of them just imagined stories to secure early release or improve their conditions in prison. Still, she understood that she couldn't ignore this lead without verification. She went to the prison and met with the man who supposedly had the information. According to him, he shared a cell for some time with an individual convicted of child abuse, the same charge as his. On this common ground, the two became friends and occasionally exchanged details about their crimes. One day, the cellmate told him that, among other things, he had murdered Jessica Dish. After that, the informant dropped a bombshell, giving the detective the name of this man, leaving her in shock. It was Stanley Dish, Jessica's uncle, her father's brother. According to the informant, Stanley told him that he had sexually abused Jessica for several years while living in their home. He threatened to kill her or someone close to her if she ever talked about it. In the spring of '99, when Jessica got a boyfriend, Stanley began to fear that sooner or later, she might confess to him about the abuse by her own uncle. On the morning of September 10th, Stanley arrived at her home when Jessica was alone. She was outside getting into her car, having already loaded all her belongings. Stanley approached her and demanded that she break up with her boyfriend, but Jessica refused and threatened to expose him if he didn't leave her alone. He started threatening her, and she reached for the phone, attempting to dial 911. Stanley tried to grab her, but Jessica broke free and ran into the house. The man followed her to her room, struck her, and bound her in her sheets before taking her to an abandoned shed not far from where her body would later be found. Stanley kept her alive there for several days, subjecting her to abuse and torture. Then, he killed her, moved the body to a visible location near the road, and buried the sheets in the ground beneath the shed. He also mentioned that after the murder, he removed some of the victim's limbs, hoping to mislead the police into thinking drug traffickers were involved. Detective Hunt realized that this information was never disclosed. Only Jessica's closest relatives knew about the missing limbs, so the informant couldn't have fabricated this detail. At last, he also added that Stanley buried Jessica's shoe beneath a broken tree near the shed. Hunt decided to verify all this information about the buried evidence. Given the shortage of staff in the local police department, no one from there could help her, so she reached out to Jessica's brother and a few other relatives who agreed to participate in the search. She didn't tell them that Stanley might be the murderer, as she decided to find some evidence to support these shocking accusations first. On the first day of the search, they failed to uncover any clues under the pouring rain. They dug in the areas matching the informant's description, but it yielded no results. The next day, Jessica's brother and Hunt returned to the site. On the way, he pointed out an abandoned barn alongside the road. They headed there and started digging the soil inside, and almost immediately, there was a long-awaited breakthrough. They discovered a buried bedsheet. Hunt collected the evidence and hurried to Jessica's home. Throughout these years, her parents hadn't made any changes to her room. It remained exactly as it was on the day their daughter vanished. Thanks to this, Hunt was able to confirm that the found bedsheet was part of Jessica's bedding. It was absent from the bed, and the other linen shared the same pattern. Immediately after this discovery, Stanley was arrested and brought in for questioning. He refused to confess to the crime, although he appeared visibly shaken during the conversation with the detectives. Stanley, accused of murdering his niece Jessica, left her father in disbelief. Initially in denial, he later realized Stanley had misled the search party when Jessica first vanished, steering them away from the barn where she was held, only yards away from where Stanley claimed to be ill. While readying for trial, Detective Hunt delved into the suspect's history for more proof. She found he had not only assaulted a family member before, but several female relatives also reported childhood sexual abuse by him. Hearing all of these stories, the police concluded that Stanley had been doing this for 3 decades. Despite all of this, Detective Hunt realized that securing a conviction for the murder would be challenging, since there were almost no straight pieces of evidence against Stanley, such as fingerprints or DNA. She continued to dig into the case until she stumbled upon a box of old files she hadn't examined yet. Looking through its contents, Hunt was once again shocked by the incompetence of her predecessors, who initially handled the case. In the box, there was a letter dated June 26, 2002. Another informant wrote to the police the same story that Hunt heard only 12 years later from the Kentucky prison inmate. By the summer of 2002, Stanley was already serving time for assaulting an underage relative. During that time, he told his cellmate about murdering Jessica. The cellmate, who happened to be a police informant, wrote a letter to the department handling the case, disclosing all the gruesome details of what Stanley had done to his niece. And what do you think the police did? They simply ignored the letter, likely convinced of Brooks's involvement in those years, so they didn't bother considering other suspects. Once again, Hunt was disappointed by her colleagues' lack of professionalism. If only they had paid more attention to their job, this case could have been solved back in 2002. By now, after all these years, she could only await the trial, hoping that Stanley would finally face delayed justice for his actions. The process began in 2015, and Stanley declared his innocence. Present in the courtroom, Jessica's parents could hardly look at their relative who had destroyed their lives. They were also furious that he couldn't just confess to give them some sort of closure. The prosecution believed that the chances of obtaining a guilty verdict on murder charges were relatively low, mainly because there was almost no substantial evidence against him. There was also a problem with the assault charges involving other girls in the family. All of them would have to testify in court, describing Stanley's actions against them in great detail. So the prosecution decided to offer Stanley a plea deal. They agreed to drop the death penalty in exchange for Stanley's confession, both in assaults on relatives and Jessica's murder. In the end, he agreed and pleaded guilty. As part of the deal, he wasn't required to disclose any specific details of the crimes. Jessica's parents, who desired to know the whole truth, weren't happy about it, but Stanley remained silent. Under the plea deal terms, the murderer received a 20-year prison sentence with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Given that he was 56 at the time of sentencing, Stanley might be released at 71. After the trial, Jessica's father promised that if his brother doesn't die in prison, he'll be waiting for him to take matters into his own hands. In 2019, Stanley gave his first interview, claiming he didn't kill Jessica. According to him, he was at work that morning, but it was impossible to verify after 2 decades. He also couldn't explain how 2 unrelated informants came up with identical stories, including details only known to the murderer, such as a bedsheet burial site. As for David Brooks, detectives still don't rule out his potential minor involvement in the case. Stanley knew him and could have asked for help in disposing of the victim's belongings. Given Brooks's low IQ, he might not have fully understood the whole situation. It's possible that he burned the girl's clothes in the fire, and Stanley might have handed him the gloves with the scent of the body that the dogs detected. It's also possible that he left Jessica's photo in Stanley's shed to frame him. However, the truth may never be revealed, as Brooks passed away in 2021 due to heart problems. It's worth mentioning the moment when, on the third day of Jessica's disappearance, her younger brother heard a cry for help outside, thinking it was his sister. It's still impossible to say with certainty what happened at that time. The girl could have still been alive, but Stanley was holding her in the barn a few miles away from her home. Most likely, the child either imagined it due to stress or someone else was screaming. However, there's a somewhat unlikely version. As we recall, right after Jessica's father rushed outside, Stanley drove up to the house, which means he was nearby. It could be that the girl was in his car with her mouth taped shut or unconscious. However, this theory seems highly improbable. On March 19, 2014, an emergency call was made to the police in Guamuchil, located in the state of Sinaloa, Mexico. The caller's voice was broken and pleading for help for his daughter. Officers rushed to a house in the Las Fuentes area. When they arrived, they saw the front doors wide open. Inside, upstairs, they found a man and his younger daughter, who was about 10 years, both crying inconsolably. The man led the police to a room where they found the lifeless body of a 16-year-old girl with over 60 wounds. This tragic news spread quickly through the city and shocked its residents. Nobody could comprehend who could take the life of such a young girl. Anel Baez Alvarez was born on March 17, 1998, in Guamuchil, Sinaloa. She was the second child of Idalia Alvarez and Hugo Baez. Her older brother was Omar. Later, they were joined by their younger sibling, Aid. During her childhood, Anel faced no particular problems. Although initially reserved, she grew to be self-assured with grace and charm. Her father worked as a tailor, and the family enjoyed prosperity and closeness. However, this happiness ended when Anel's mother was diagnosed with cancer in the early 2010s. The children had to mature quickly to care for her. Following a tough battle with illness, Idalia passed away in 2012. The family was devastated but did not waver. They supported each other through grief and tried to make life as comfortable as possible. The tragedy brought Anel closer to her sister. They shared everything, both sadness and difficulties, together. Despite these challenges, Anel remained cheerful and friendly with a passion for dancing and music. As she transitioned to high school, she emerged as an ideal daughter, managing household chores, looking after her younger sister, and maintaining good grades. One of her favorite activities was cooking for her family. Her desserts were especially popular. Anel also overcame shyness and became one of the most well-liked girls in school. She even formed a musical group where she took on the role of a singer, developing a fondness for the ballad Amor Eterno. Around the same time, Anel met someone who would become her best friend, at least for a while. Her name was Andy Elizabeth Gutierrez. They became an inseparable duo, drawing admiration from everyone around and being considered the most popular girls in school. They their bond through social media posts. On October 14, 2012, Anel uploaded a photo with Andy expressing her joy about their friendship. She expressed gratitude to God for the opportunity to be close to her, and even wrote that Andy had become not just a friend, but a sister to her. For a while, everything was wonderful, but over time, things changed. Despite being the same age, their personalities turned out to be completely different. Anel was a sweet girl who loved love songs and spending time with her family. Meanwhile, Andy lived in an unstable environment and became increasingly involved in what was known as narco culture. This urban community was also known in Mexico as Buchona. Andy was consistently present at events featuring musicians of this kind, such as the concert of the band Caliber 50 during the closing of the carnival celebrations in Guamuchil in 2014. The girl also held very clear political stances. On one occasion, she shared on her social media that she participated in a march supporting Joaquin El Chapo Guzman Loera. On her social media page, she wrote, "March for the liberation of El Chapo. We must join this great cause," which was accompanied by a photo. Unlike her friend, Anel typically didn't express her ideology on social media and didn't share the views supported by Andy. As a result, the distance between them grew larger. In 2014, both entered Guamachil High School at the Autonomous University of Sinaloa, but hardly communicated with each other. Each created her own group of friends. Anel started hanging out with Melissa, Karim, Manuel, and Maria Jose, friends who led similar lifestyles to hers and followed her everywhere and admired her deeply. Maria Jose, who had known Anel since elementary school, considered Anel the mother of their entire group and assumed this role, always taking care of everyone. Despite maintaining a polite and orderly demeanor, she kept her distance from Randy and never informed her father or siblings about their dispute. Around this time, Randy's social media behavior became erratic. On her page, she started posting negative and troubling messages. For instance, some posts were highly alarming, mentioning things like pregnant 13-year-old girls and year-old girls taking active substances. Other posts were quite disturbing, such as, "My mom is upset that I killed my ex and buried him in my garden," or, "Lucky the living dead she is envied." Initially, these posts seemed nonsensical. Randy often drew them from forums or songs. However, over time, her messages began to take on a more threatening tone. On February 5, 2014, she wrote, "I'm going to bury you by the end of this year." Then, on February 23rd of the same month, she posted, "I may seem very calm, but in my head I've killed you at least 3 times. And in the end, my mind is filled with new ideas every day." A few days later, Randy wrote, "Thank God no one hears my thoughts and everything will definitely happen tomorrow." The unsettling messages continued to appear with increasing frequency. On March 3rd, she posted, "Maybe not now and not tomorrow, but soon. I assure you I won't tell her anything then, but know that I have already mentally destroyed you." The last post was dated March 16th. She wrote, "This seriously drives me to despair." No one within her social circle knew who the threats were aimed at. However, rumors began circulating at school. Many speculated that Randy was upset with Anel because they were no longer friends. Some even accused Randy of being jealous of Anel since everyone adored her. Despite this turmoil, Anel appeared unfazed by what Randy was posting on social media. Anel celebrated her birthday with a large party where she wore a beautiful pink dress and was undoubtedly the star of the evening. Everything in her life seemed perfect until her unexpected absence on March 19th raised concerns among her family. Hugo received a call from the school attended by his younger daughter, informing him that Anel had not come to pick her up as usual. Initially, Hugo wasn't overly concerned. He thought Anel might have overslept or was with friends. After school, he went to pick up his daughter. The way, Hugo decided to call Anel to ensure everything was okay, but she didn't answer. He assumed she was still sleeping. After picking his daughter, Hugo tried to contact Anel again. She didn't respond. He repeatedly called her number with no success, and his worry deepened. Hugo headed home in the Los Fuentes area. Upon arriving, he noticed that the front door was wide open. Entering the main living room, father and daughter saw that some items had been moved. They thought it might have been a robbery. They shouted Anel's name and searched for her throughout the house. She did not respond and couldn't be found anywhere. Finally, Hugo reached her room. He tried to open the door, but it was locked, raising his concern further. He knocked several times without getting a response from Anel. Hugo then broke down the door. What he saw took his breath away. Anel's lifeless body lay on the floor with numerous wounds and blood stains around her. He immediately called the police, who soon arrived at the scene. Seeing the crime scene, officers initially thought that a very strong person or group had committed the crime. Although there were blood stains in the room, they were minimal. It was evident someone had tried to clean them up. Later during the autopsy, the forensic expert determined that Annelle had sustained 65 stab wounds in total. Officers were convinced that this attack was carried out by someone harboring strong hatred toward her. Moreover, since neither doors nor windows were forced open, detectives believed Annelle knew her assailant and let them into the house willingly. They speculated she might have arranged to meet with this person that day. However, upon checking her mobile phone, they found nothing suggesting such an arrangement. No invitations or planned visits were evident on her phone records. Initially, Hugo wasn't too concerned. He figured Annelle might have overslept or was with friends. After school, he went to pick up his daughter. The way, Hugo decided to call Annelle just to check in, but there was no answer. Thought she might still be sleeping. After picking up his daughter, he tried contacting Annelle again, but there was still no response. Hugo called repeatedly with no success. His concern grew. Heading home to their place in Los Fuentes, he noticed the front door was wide open. Inside, some items had been moved around. It looked like a robbery might have taken place. Father and daughter started calling out for Annelle and searched the house frantically. There was no response from her, and she wasn't anywhere to be found. When Hugo reached her room, he found the door locked, which raised his alarm even more. He knocked several times without any reply. Eventually, Hugo broke down the door. What he saw left him breathless. Annelle's lifeless body lay on the floor with multiple wounds and bloodstains nearby. He immediately called the police, who arrived promptly at the scene. Observing the crime scene initially led officers to think that someone very strong, or possibly a group, had committed the crime. Although there were blood stains in the room, minimal ones, it appeared that an attempt had been made to clean them up. Later during the autopsy, a forensic expert determined that Annelle had sustained 65 stab wounds. Officers began believing that someone with intense hatred towards her carried out the attack. There were no signs of forced entry. Doors and windows remained intact, suggesting that Annelle knew her assailant and let them in willingly. They even speculated whether she had arranged to meet someone that day. However, upon checking her mobile phone records, they found nothing indicating an invite to anyone to her home that day. It appeared to be a random encounter since there were no surveillance cameras in the vicinity. Officers decided to interview the neighbors. A few of them reported seeing a slender girl with black hair leaving the house. These statements helped narrow down the pool of suspects, and investigators were no longer looking for a man or a group of people. Following this, officers began questioning Annelle's close circle. All relatives had solid alibis, asserting that the girl had no enemies, was very friendly, and they couldn't imagine anyone wishing her harm. However, detectives took an interest in a post on Randy's social media in which she expressed shock at Annelle's death. Some people conveyed their condolences, but others started pointing fingers at Randy as the murderer. They flooded the post with comments accusing her and claiming she was guilty of the crime. Randy deleted her account, but it was already too late. Police called several of Annelle's friends to ask about the connection between the two girls. All of them mentioned that they had grown apart, and it was evident that Randy envied Annelle because she was more popular. After these interviews, detectives visited Randy's social media profiles and found numerous threatening posts she had written a few months earlier. But that wasn't all. Just hours after Annelle's death, Randy wrote, "I'm a fool. Oh my God, what have I done?" Although these posts lacked context, everything pointed to Randy as the primary suspect in the crime. This information was kept confidential because officers feared she might flee before they could apprehend her. The agents patiently waited for the right moment. The case drew so much attention that hundreds of people gathered at a well-known funeral home in Guayaquil to bid farewell to Annelle. Friends, relatives, teachers, and classmates cried and embraced each other, unable to believe such a young girl had left life behind. Despite the large crowd, two people stood out with their presence. As soon as the girls entered the room, they began chatting and eating ice cream. A few minutes later, Andy suggested watching a movie. She then mentioned she was going to the bathroom, asked them not to pause the movie. However, instead of going to the bathroom, Andy went downstairs to the kitchen. She picked up a sharp knife and returned to the room, concealing it under her clothes. She noticed that Nell was lying on the bed with her back to the door. Seizing this opportunity, Andy took out the knife and started attacking her. Nell attempted to defend herself by scratching, pushing, and punching, but couldn't overpower Andy. Nell lost too much blood and eventually fell lifeless to the floor, becoming a victim of a heinous crime. Andy began showing signs of impatience, aware that she needed to act quickly as Nell's family would return home soon. She used all available rags to try cleaning up the blood, but could only manage to wipe away part of it due to its large amount. Eventually, she went to the bathroom, washed her hands, and put on clothes taken from Nell's wardrobe. Afterward, she closed the door to the room, leaving her best friend's body inside, and ran out of the house, leaving the front door ajar. When Anel's relatives heard this account, they became furious. They knew that the story about the photograph was a lie. Anel was not capable of such an act. It didn't align with her character. Furthermore, Anel's friends claimed they had never seen that photograph before. They noted that since both girls were so popular, it would have been impossible for such a photo not to have spread, and someone would have surely downloaded it by now. All signs pointed toward envy as being the actual motive for this crime. However, at this point in time, motive no longer mattered because Andy had become the sole suspect in this crime and was officially charged with involuntary manslaughter. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. 4 officers escorted Andy into juvenile court proceedings at prosecutors' offices specializing in cases involving minors. After an hour-and-a-half hearing session took place, Andy was found guilty. Although it was clear that she had devised a premeditated plan and the murder was intentional, given that she was 6 years old, she received sentence of 7 years imprisonment. She was transferred to the juvenile detention center in Kakan. Anel's family believed justice had been achieved and thought was done. However, they were gravely mistaken. The defense filed an appeal, arguing that the trial took place in Kakan, which was incorrect since the crime occurred within Los Mochis' jurisdiction. The higher court decided to reopen the trial, this time in the proper jurisdiction. Despite the swift process, the verdict remained unchanged. This decision sparked widespread outrage among the public. Hundreds of Mexicans and foreigners shared images on social media with posters calling for justice for Anel. Several polls were conducted with over 5 million users believing Aren's sentence was unjust. Many felt she deserved a much longer prison term. The trial took place again, and once more, the girl received a 7-year imprisonment sentence. Hugo addressed journalists expressing his dissatisfaction. He appreciated that the sentence wasn't reduced, but felt Randy's age shouldn't have shielded her from a longer term. He hoped she would at least serve the full sentence, but even that didn't happen. On July 6, 2016, her sentence got reduced to 5 years of imprisonment. Moreover, it was also decided at this hearing that with good behavior, she could be released earlier. State police officers had to close the courthouse gates as numerous journalists wanted photographs of her. This case became one of the most high-profile in the country. Hugo wasn't informed about this hearing, which caused him significant outrage, and from this point onward, circumstances became even worse. On Friday, September 23, 2017, another hearing analyzed Ari's behavior in connection with reforms in federal juvenile justice law. The girl was released after serving only 3.5 years out of her initial sentence. Leaving court, Hugo expressed extreme dissatisfaction. He felt he had witnessed a great injustice. He regretted that legislative reforms appeared to benefit offenders rather than victims. On Monday, September 17, 2018, in Ames, Iowa, the weather was warm and clear. That morning, Celia Barkin Arroyna, 22 years old, decided to head to Coldwater Golf Links Club to play golf before her university classes. On her way there, she chatted with her mother. Her mom, sensing something might be off, asked if everything was okay and safe on the course. Celia confidently assured her that she was perfectly safe and that there were plenty of people around. Sadly, though, as it turned out, no place is entirely safe. Soon after arriving at the course, this talented athlete became the victim of a terrible crime. Celia was born on July 6, 1996, in Point San Miguel, a village in Cantabria, northern Spain. Her family had lived there for 8 generations. She moved to Iowa thanks to an athletic golf scholarship. Offered many choices by various universities due to her talent in golf, she ultimately chose Ames, Iowa, a quaint town of 65,000 people reminding her of home. Her family remained back in Spain. Her parents, Maria Arusa and Marcos Barkin, had 2 children, Celia and Andres. Her father worked as a butcher. Her mother initially worked as a salesperson in a clothing store, but became a housewife after having children. Though they weren't wealthy and led modest lives, the family was tight-knit and determined to provide a good education for their children. Andres went to law school, while Celia's success in golf earned her the scholarship to the United States. Celia's love for golf came from her mother, who loved the sport when she was young herself. Even though Celia was smaller than other girls her age, she adapted by using specific techniques to win. Celia's story is one of talent and promise cut tragically short. She sought opportunity far from home, only to face an unimaginable end in what seemed like a safe and peaceful refuge. When the girl grew up, she was petite and worked tirelessly on her game. Considering her short stature, she dreamed of becoming a professional and successful golfer, not for popularity, but out of sheer determination to succeed in the sport. She wanted to make life easier for her parents. The girl constantly spoke about buying them a house and taking care of them. For this purpose, Celia practiced diligently to achieve excellent results. Throughout her career, Celia received many titles and awards. She won victories in various competitions. Specifically, Celia secured the European Women's Amateur Championship in Slovenia in June 2018. She finished second in the women's team golf competition in Europe and was the 2018 Big 12 Women's Golf Champion in the United States. Additionally, she was named the 2018 Iowa State Athlete of the Year. Given these achievements, there were high expectations for her future. When Celia moved to the United States, her relationship with her family remained strong. She communicated with her parents daily, sometimes even 4 or 5 times each day when she had free time. Celia missed her family deeply. A nightly call before bed to say goodnight and share daily successes became a cherished ritual. During vacations, she would visit her family in Spain and continue training hard to improve her skills during these visits. Her mother supported her passion and trained alongside her. Celia settled well in Iowa, where she lived with her boyfriend Carlos Negri Nobilis in a rented apartment. Their relationship has an intriguing history. When Celia and Carlos met at university, she was dating another individual at that time, while Carlos fell for her instantly. Her charming smile, piercing gaze, cheerfulness, and kindness captivated him, while her determination earned his respect. Despite his feelings, Carlos accepted that Celia was with someone else, but became her best friend and steadfast supporter for over a year, until she eventually became disillusioned with her boyfriend and ended the relationship. Carlos finally confessed his feelings during one of their walks. Celia, pulling him by his shirt, kissed him, and without a word, drove away in her car. Carlos was overjoyed that she felt the same way. He ran around the dormitory screaming with happiness. That's how their romance began. To celebrate this new chapter, Carlos set off fireworks to impress Celia. He even sent her a video where he confessed she was incredible and 1 in a billion. After that, they were inseparable. They moved in together and started sharing their lives. Lately, their conversations included dreams about their wedding and even potential names for their future children. By May 2017, they were engaged and preparing for the biggest event of their lives. That same year, Carlos graduated with a college degree and secured a position at an engineering firm in Ames. Celia was finishing her last semester at Iowa State University, majoring in civil engineering as well. After ending her athletic career, Celia dreamed of being an engineer to benefit others. She wanted to show that women could succeed in construction too. Celia excelled academically and showed through her own experience the success women could achieve in this field. She had many friends and enjoyed surprising them with delicious Spanish dishes she cooked well. Among the university students, there was a popular video of Celia flipping a Spanish omelet into the air, adding butter to it mid-flip so it burst like a fireball. A trick she performed masterfully when requested by friends. In summer 2018, Celia returned to Spain to spend time with her family, but came back to Iowa later to graduate. The promising athlete was part of the Iowa State women's golf team and also competed individually. She was preparing for an upcoming competition, but unfortunately, these plans never came to fruition. The assassin was already on the lookout for a victim and preparing for an attack when Celia arrived at the golf club on September 17, 2018. She had just finished a conversation with her mother. The staff, familiar with the notable athlete, informed her that 15 older gentlemen from Des Moines had also arrived and were scheduled to play golf at 8:45. The group was directed to the starting line where the first 4 holes were located. Celia watched them arrive in golf carts and begin their game. A collection of retirees indicated to her to advance and begin her round. Celia complied, using her cart to play the first hole, then advancing directly to number 4 so as not to delay the senior group. The seniors described her as both polite and friendly. Celia then proceeded toward the 7th hole, an area less frequented due to its distance from other holes and its border with Squaw Creek Park, which was known for its dense vegetation. Athletes generally avoided this area as it could sometimes host unauthorized visitors and even aggressive homeless individuals. Unfamiliar with these local nuances, she ventured there nonetheless. Players needing to reach the 9th hole had to cross a bridge via a wide path and navigate through a section of woods. One coach remarked that this area felt quite eerie, akin to Sleepy Hollow. Celia was headed that way later in the morning. Around 10:30 a.m., a group of 15 people approached this location and saw Celia's cart with her belongings still in place, but Celia herself was nowhere in sight. While playing on the field, they noted something unusual. Celia hadn't appeared within 10 minutes, causing concern among the group. Deciding to investigate further, they approached her cart and sought out any sign of Celia. As they drew nearer, they observed her t-shirt, baseball cap, and various personal items scattered in the field. Her phone remained on the cart. It seemed as though some items might have accidentally fallen from her pocket. However, why her t-shirt was lying around and why she had abandoned her phone remained unclear. They searched around, but there was no one in. Next, they the club management and reported the troubling discovery. The group mentioned they'd seen a pretty blonde girl playing golf earlier, but now she was gone and her stuff was still there. The staff who arrived recognized it was Celia and started looking for her. In less than half an hour, they found a body floating in the pond near the 9th hole. That's when called the police. Once they retrieved the body from the water, officers identified her. It was Celia Barkin, the reigning European champion. Celia had been stabbed several times in both the neck and torso. A search dog immediately picked up a trail and led officers to a tent in a wooded area of Squaw Creek Park. However, the tent was empty, with blood inside. The police thought a homeless man might have attacked Celia and began searching for him. Just as they were searching near the tent, a man approached them saying he lived there and wanted to get his tent. His name was Colin Richards. He was also 22 years old like Celia, but their lives were worlds apart. Officers quickly realized he might be involved in the murder. His face was scratched up. Inside his black backpack, they found bloody clothes, a t-shirt and shorts along with clean clothes he had changed into. The search dogs even reacted to his scent. Richards had a deep wound on his left arm that was bleeding. He tried hiding it from officers. Based on this evidence, Colin Richards was taken into custody by police. According to him, before law enforcement arrived, he'd been at a friend's house. 2 male friends had brought him back to the park to get his tent, and when he got there, he saw police. Richards denied any involvement in the crime and stated he had never met Celia. He claimed the scratches on his face were from branches encountered while walking through wooded areas. Colin was already known to police due to his abuse of illegal substances, alcohol, and mental health problems. He became after he was released from prison 3 months prior to the murder. Colin had served about 7 months in jail for burglary and had previously been convicted several times for offenses, demonstrating a long history of legal troubles. Growing up in a dysfunctional family, Colin had been familiar to law enforcement since his teenage years. Detectives interviewed 3 men who were acquaintances of Colin. One of the homeless men shared a tent with him, while the other 2 provided him a ride from his home to the park. The owner of the house allowed Colin to wash and change his clothes because he was disheveled, covered in mud, blood, sand, and water. After cleaning up and changing clothes, Colin left with his bloody garments in a black backpack to run to the park for his tent. According to these men, Colin was acting unusually that day, extremely nervous and in a hurry. He did not explain why he needed to leave so suddenly, but merely said he had badly cut himself and soiled his clothes. Another homeless man living with him mentioned that Colin always carried a serrated knife used for domestic purposes. Just a day before the murder, Colin had expressed a desire to rape and kill someone. However, this statement wasn't taken seriously by his friend. Consequently, Colin was charged with first-degree murder immediately after Celia's body was discovered. Investigators believed the crime was premeditated. They thought he planned to kill someone and was actively searching for a victim that day. The judge set bail at $5 million. However, lacking such funds, Colin remained in custody awaiting trial. Meanwhile, Celia's family in Spain remained unaware of these tragic events, but grew increasingly worried as she hadn't returned their calls or messages. Police officers alongside Ames tried reaching out to their colleagues in Point San Miguel and embassy personnel in Madrid to inform Celia's family about the terrible news. However, since it was past midnight in Spain, there was no one available at work or answering the phone. The coach had to make the most difficult phone call of his life. After several hours with no updates, the parents learned that their daughter had been brutally. Later, a serrated knife was discovered in a wooded area containing fingerprints and DNA of the homeless man. Additionally, blood under the victim's fingernails contained particles of Colin's skin, demonstrating that these scratches were inflicted by the deceased rather than by branches. Initially, the homeless man denied any guilt. However, under pressure from substantial evidence, he confessed to his actions. He stated that he had consumed substances that day and was not thinking clearly. While walking through the woods, he saw a young girl who was alone and decided she would be an easy target. Colin had never met or known her before. Celia was an unfortunate victim of his violent attack. Iowa abolished the death penalty in 1965. Thus, he faced a maximum sentence of life imprisonment without parole. At his trial, Colin's family provided an account of his life. His parents were never married or living together when he was born. For the first 10 years of his life, Colin lived with his father, who raised him strictly and often sent him to bed alone while frequenting bars himself. His grandparents cared for him during this period until his mother contested custody and brought him to live with her after marrying another man and having 2 more children. They resided in the countryside because it seemed more peaceful there. The household maintained strict discipline, and Colin's room was always spotless, a point which led family members to joke that he should join the army. Colin performed well academically, but began experiencing behavioral problems as a teenager after reconnecting with his alcoholic father. Despite attempts by his father to re-educate him, Colin did not heed advice and was ultimately kicked out of their home at age 15. From there, he joined poor company, dropped out of school, and became addicted to alcohol as well as other substances. When Colin was 18, he had a girlfriend who was twice his age. In May 2015, he was arrested for domestic violence. He was found and sentenced to 60 days in jail. Another time, when was accused of shoplifting, he threatened to return and shoot up the place. Cole's life spiraled out of control, but no one seemed to notice. In the 2 years that followed the domestic violence case, he was repeatedly arrested for theft, harassment, and attempted burglary. He was sent to undergo behavioral intervention courses, which didn't help. In November 2017, Colin was incarcerated at Mount Pleasant Correctional Facility for 2 years for burglary, as well as a probation violation. Despite disciplinary problems, including fights with other inmates, he was released on parole after just 7 months in June 2018 because the prison was running out of space. Only 3 months later, he killed Celia. After leaving prison, Colin was met by his mother and stepfather with whom he lived. They resumed their relationship and corresponded while Colin was behind bars. His parents believed in him and gave him a chance for a normal life, taking his word that he would not use illegal substances and cease communicating with old friends from bad company. However, 2 weeks later, he was kicked out of his home for not keeping his promise. Colin headed to Ames, which was an hour away from his home. For a while, he found refuge in the city's only homeless shelter, but there weren't enough beds. He asked his mother for help, and she bought him a tent. In his new city, Colin quickly came to the attention of the Ames Police Department. On June 29th, he was arrested for public drunkenness. On August 11th, police received a complaint from a Target store that Colin and another homeless man were camping in an open lot behind the store and were chased away. They then camped in Squaw Creek Park so as not to disturb anyone else. Colin stated that the police permitted them to camp there, but this is contradicted by the police, who assert that overnight camping in the park is prohibited and no one advised him to break the law. On September 2nd, just 15 days before Celia's murder, police responded to a call at Burger where Colin had threatened customers with his knife. Despite this, he was released. On September 8th, his mother and stepfather came to Ames to celebrate Colin's 22nd birthday. They took him to dinner and then to the laundromat to wash his clothes. His mother was concerned about his behavior. Colin was uncommunicative and distant, giving brief, one-word responses to their questions. After they dropped him off at a tent in the park where he was living with another homeless man, they drove home. At that point, Colin confessed to his friend that he wanted to rape and kill a woman. Tragically, Celia was found dead the next morning, though she had not been raped. Police believe he did not have enough time. Colin's parents said it was his own fault. They tried to help him, but could not change his path. Consequently, Colin received a life sentence without parole on August 23, 2019. He's currently serving his sentence at Story County Jail in Nevada, Iowa. The entire town of Ames mourned Celia's death. Thousands gathered for a candlelight ceremony to honor the talented athlete. Her family was devastated by the news of her murder and outraged that someone who had achieved nothing and aspired to nothing had so cruelly taken her life. Colin showed no regard for Celia's life. He chose her randomly and killed her because of a violent impulse. The family of the deceased found some solace in the verdict and were relieved that the perpetrator was apprehended quickly and prevented from harming anyone else again. They only wished they hadn't let their daughter go so far away, even though it was her dream. Statistically, the U.S. is not safe. The per capita murder rate in the U.S. is 26 times higher than in Spain. In their small town in Spain, the last murder was 100 years ago. All to blame, the family believes, is the widespread availability of illegal substances, which are literally at every turn. This has led to an increase in violence. Her parents have kept Celia's room exactly as she left it, with one notable addition, an engineering degree posthumously awarded by the state of Iowa. They often stroll through the local golf club and remember when their daughter took her first steps in the sport. Here, the community of Ames, including the university administration and students, were outraged by this crime. Particularly concerning was that the golf course bordered a wooded area and had no fencing. As a result of this negligence by the golf club, the girl's life was put in danger. This was not the first murder case in that neighborhood. Back in 2008, there was a stabbing incident where one man was killed and a homeless assailant was found guilty of murder. It remains unknown if measures were subsequently taken by the golf club to ensure player safety on holes 7 and N. After Celia's death, her boyfriend Carlos could not stay in a city where everything reminded him of her. Carlos moved to Florida, and his further fate is unknown. Celia's brother experienced considerable stress following her death and lost significant weight. After receiving a law degree, he decided to join the police force to help others, a path encouraged by his sister, who had always hinted at his purpose in life. 18-year-old Allison Bonilla was returning home by bus when she noticed two men following her. Scared, she texted her mother and boyfriend, saying she'd run home after she got off the bus. Unfortunately, Allison never returned home that day, and it took about 6 months to find her. Allison Pamela Bonilla Vasquez was born on November 7, 2001, in Cartago, Costa Rica. Being the only child in the family, Allison lived with her mother, Yendri Vasquez. But Yendri wasn't the only one involved in Allison's upbringing. Allison's grandparents, Ramon and Marjorie, and Aunt Ziamara, often helped Yendri. According to Yendri, Allison's father left them immediately after she was born. He was in a relationship with another woman who was pregnant at the time. He abandoned his wife and daughter to be with her. He didn't want to be a part of Allison's life. Yendri said there was only one time when he asked to meet his daughter. He had lung cancer at the time, and that was the only reason she allowed him to meet Allison. It's worth saying that his second family didn't even know about Allison's existence until almost the whole country heard about her disappearance. Allison was very close to her mother. She considered Yendri both her mom and her dad. It may seem strange, but she always gave her mother gifts for Father's Day. Their relationship was much closer than the one between mother and daughter. They were best friends who did everything together. Allison could tell Yendri absolutely anything without fear of being misunderstood or judged. Allison had a large family, and although she didn't have a father, she didn't feel lonely or abandoned. She loved spending time with her family and going to church every Sunday. Relatives described Allison as a very kind, outgoing, and friendly girl. She always looked happy in the photos. There wasn't even the slightest hint of sadness or longing in her eyes. Allison has dreamed of working in the modeling business all her life. She dropped out of the 8th grade to take makeup classes because combining school with makeup classes seemed too hard. Allison didn't want to waste time on an education that couldn't help her reach her goals. She soon started looking for a job to help her mother with the bills. Yet, every time Allison would drop off her resume at places, she wouldn't get any callbacks. Yendri saw that her daughter was very depressed about this. Knowing Allison wasn't suitable for any job because of her incomplete education, Yendri advised her to attend night school. Therefore, at 18, Allison enrolled in a school, Liceo Enrique Guier Sens, located a few miles from her home. While studying at school, she received a certificate of completion of pastry courses and began making cakes. The cakes and other desserts made by Allison were just amazing. Everyone in the neighborhood was delighted with her cakes, so it became a good way for her to earn money. Allison was in a romantic relationship with Harold Segura Solano, who lived in Cachi. Cachi is a district of the Paraíso Canton in the Cartago province of Costa Rica. Allison usually spent the first half of the day at home with her mom. Later, she would meet with Harold and then go to evening school at 6 p.m. Therefore, she always returned home quite late, most often by bus. The path from the bus stop to her house ran through a quite dangerous place. It was a road with a lot of vegetation and an almost complete absence of light and people. So Allison always informed her mother of changes in her location. Sometimes, her mother even met her at a bus stop or the bridge halfway along the way. On March 4, 2020, Allison went to her mom's salon to get a manicure and chat with her. After that, she visited her friend Paula, who studied at school with her. They spent about 15 minutes at Paula's house and then went to school together. They arrived there around 6 p.m. and split up, as both were in different courses. After spending about 15 minutes in an empty classroom, Allison realized that the school had canceled her classes that day. She decided the best way to continue the evening would be to visit her aunt, who lived near the school. Her aunt wasn't home, so Allison decided to spend time with her boyfriend Harold before going home. However, he wasn't home. His mother said he was at work and was supposed to return soon, inviting Allison to the house to wait for him. When Harold returned, they had a big family dinner, chatting on various topics and discussing plans. After a while, Harold excused himself, saying he would be back soon. He needed to leave urgently. At about 8:15 p.m., Allison left Harold's house without waiting for him to return. This moment was a start of a series of events that the whole country soon learned about. Harold returned home about 5 minutes later, and when he saw that Allison had left, he started texting her. He asked where she was and offered to take her home on his motorcycle. Allison immediately replied that she was already at the bus stop, so there was no need to worry. While waiting for the bus, Allison texted her friend Paula and asked if her cousin could take her home on his bike. He refused, saying his bike was a professional cycling bike unsuitable for two people. It remains unclear why she didn't ask her boyfriend for help. Perhaps she was angry with him or didn't want to bother him. As a result, Allison went home by bus. She got off the bus at about 8:43 p.m. Her home was about a mile away. Allison asked her mom to walk towards her as she had a bad feeling and was afraid. At 8:45 p.m., she texted her boyfriend and mother, saying two suspicious men were following her. They got off the bus at the same stop as her. Therefore, she decided to run home to lose them. As I have already mentioned, the road that Allison was going to run along was quite dangerous. There were almost no lights, and people rarely used it. There was only one surveillance camera there. It captured a blurry spot, which presumably was Allison. When Yendri, Allison's mom, came to the bridge half a mile from home to meet her daughter, she didn't find her. She tried to stay calm, thinking that maybe Allison had returned to the bus stop as a safety measure, but she didn't find her there either. Then she decided that Allison might not have noticed her and was already home. Yet, when Yendri returned home, she found the house empty. Yendri started calling the family and her daughter's friends, asking if they knew where Allison might be and inviting them to join the search. About 30 minutes later, Harold woke up to a phone call from Allison's aunt, Xiomara. She told him Allison was missing. He immediately started calling her, but it was all in vain. Her phone was unreachable. 3 hours later, Allison Bonilla was reported missing after her mother contacted the police. They started a search. Fortunately, Yendri knew how her daughter was dressed. As earlier, Allison had asked to take a picture of her in this outfit. Here's the last photo of Allison. At the beginning of the investigation, the police checked every place from the bus stop to Allison's house. They also examined various locations near the city, including Lake Catchy and the hydroelectric dam of the same name. On March 5, 2020, the police found the first clue, Allison's glasses. They were in the grass a mile from her house, but Allison seemed to disappear into thin air. After another 8 days, they found Allison Bonilla's ID on a coffee plantation. It was strange since they already searched that entire area many times before. Another suspicious fact was that her ID was in a too perfect place, easy to notice. There wasn't any dirt on it, as if someone had deliberately put it there to mislead the investigation or hide some details. 15 days after Allison went missing, Yendri received a call from Allison's father. Instead of offering his help or sympathy, he said that Allison went missing because she was too beautiful. Yendri did not expect such soulless words, so she immediately hung up. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Some time passed, and Allison's family, police, and volunteers continued searching for her nonstop. Every Sunday, they went outside and hung posters with Allison's photo. One day, they decided to paint messages on the street with Allison's steps, from crossing to the bridge, where it's believed she got lost. They painted 7 different messages, and one of them said, "Allison, we're waiting for you." In addition, they put posters on poles next to the road so that those passing by could notice it. At the same time, the police got a crucial lead. A man came to the police station and said he knew Allison and had seen her the night she disappeared. According to him, on March 4th, at about 8:30 p.m., he left the house on his motorcycle to pick up someone. While he was driving, he saw Allison, and he also saw a two-door wine-colored BMW pull up next to her. He said he then turned around to see what was going on. He realized who the car belonged to. It was his cousin's BMW. It had bright yellow headlights, a distinctive feature of this vehicle. That's why he was 100% sure it was his cousin's car. In addition, another man also told police that he saw the same BMW that evening near the place where Allison disappeared. It belonged to 28-year-old Nelson Sanchez Urania, known locally as Sukia, since, according to the public, he was a member of a local gang. As it turned out, Nelson knew Allison. Their families had known each other for a long time. For a while, they even lived in the same neighborhood. Allison's mom later said she only had one interaction with him. It was just a neighborly relationship rather than a friendly one. One day, Nelson offered Allison and her cousins a ride home, to which she agreed since it was daylight. She was not alone and considered him a decent person. On March 2, 2020, 2 days before Allison disappeared, Nelson sent her a Facebook message asking her to answer some questions. On the advice of her cousin, Allison agreed. Nelson then asked Allison how she felt about him. He wanted to know if Allison liked him. Allison was puzzled, as she did not understand the meaning of such a question. They weren't friends, and they hardly knew each other. When Allison asked Nelson why he was asking this, he replied, "It's because I don't think bad of you, but I just wanted to ask you if you thought bad of me." Allison replied that she didn't dislike him, assuring him everything was fine between them. Nelson thanked her and said goodbye. On March 26, 2020, detectives obtained a warrant to search the house and confiscate Nelson Sanchez Urania's car, mobile phone, and computer. His phone contained some very disturbing things. There were a lot of pictures saved on his phone showing the abuse of women. During the search of his car, the police noted the perfect cleanliness in it. As it turned out, someone cleaned the carpet and seats with polishing liquid. Yet, the front carpet of the driver's seat and the trunk carpet were missing. The police found hair and drops of blood on the trunk lid and sent it to the laboratory for analysis. After completing the visual inspection of the car, the police conducted a test with a service dog. It showed possible traces of blood on the two front seats and in the trunk of the vehicle. The luminol exam confirmed it. It's a chemical that reacts with hemoglobin in blood cells. Traces of blood, which the owner tried to destroy with cleaning products, were found in many places in the car interior. While the detectives were waiting for the results from the lab, Nelson Sanchez Urania was a free man, but he was under surveillance. They monitored his every move to ensure he did not leave the city or the country. Yendry insisted that the investigators arrest him, but the police had no grounds for this yet, so he remained at large for several months. Yendry thought someone kidnapped Allison to later ask for a monetary reward for her return. She tried to stay calm and not panic. She hoped her daughter was still alive. She left Allison's room untouched. She didn't make the bed. She didn't rearrange things. She also bought gifts for her daughter in case she returned home. "I will continue to do this because until I see anything that proves that she is dead, my daughter is alive and will return home," she told reporters. On September 2, 2020, detectives finally received results from the laboratory, confirming that the hair and blood found in Nelson Sanchez Urania's car belonged to Allison. The police arrested him on the same day. Later, Urania's ex-girlfriend told the police that he had never physically harmed her, but there was a lot of moral pressure in their relationship. He did not allow her to communicate with friends or use the internet. According to her, he only wanted an intimate relationship with her. Urania's former boss said he treated his work irresponsibly and once even stole about $1,000. In addition, they interviewed his landlord, who said that one of Urania's ex-girlfriends left him because she was tired of paying his bills. She called him a very spoiled man. On September 4th, Nelson Sanchez Urania confessed what he had done to Allison Bonilla. According to him, on the night Allison disappeared, driving by, he saw her alone, walking along an empty road. He decided to take advantage of the fact that it was late at night. Nelson realized Allison would not be afraid to get into his car because she knew him. He offered to give her a ride, to which she agreed and got into the car. But instead of going home, he turned the other way and took her to a coffee plantation, where he forced her to get out of the car. Nelson hit her so hard that her glasses fell off and she almost fainted. After that, he took her to a nearby abandoned house where he had intercourse with her against her will and then severely beat her. Urania then took her to the front seat of his car to tie her hands with some cloth and duct tape. Then, Urania put her in the trunk and drove to a landfill in San Geronimo Cachi. There, he threw Allison off a cliff into a pile of garbage. He explained his actions by using too many illegal substances. He said he was heavily under their influence. He also explained that he was obsessed with Allison. According to him, when he saw her that night, he knew that this was the right moment to realize his obscene fantasies. As is often the case in such stories, Nelson Sanchez Urania later retracted his confession, saying that the police had put pressure on him, but there was enough evidence against him to bring charges. The maximum sentence he faced was 35 years. Early in the morning on September 4th, the search team went to the landfill in San Geronimo to search for Allison's body, but since the area was too vast and not easily accessible, finding Allison's remains was not an easy task. In addition, 6 months have passed since her disappearance. Only 25 days after Urania's confession, the police found human bones, vertebrae, ribs, part of the pelvis, a femur, fragments of clothes that Allison was wearing on the day of her disappearance, as well as one sneaker with nails inside. The police sent all these clues for examination. Jose Francisco Herrera, the suspect's lawyer, said the evidence could have been falsified because it was found by a group of volunteer rescuers, not the judicial police. In addition, Herrera said it was strange the authorities had found human remains in the area specified by Urania on the same day when his client changed his statement and said he wasn't guilty. Bonilla family's lawyer, Rodrigo Araya, criticized the change in the suspect's testimony, saying the incident was a mockery of the authorities' work. On October 5, 2020, the experts confirmed that the remains found belonged to Allison Bonilla. Since the search team didn't find all parts of Allison's body, forensic experts were unable to determine the exact cause of her death. However, the expert who examined the remains concluded that numerous fractures on her body occurred after death, indicating a fall from a great height. The clothes found were torn, and there were bite marks on the sneakers, so experts concluded it could have been the work of animals, and that is why the remains were in different parts of the landfill. Yendri, Allison's mom, was furious that the police hadn't listened to her and hadn't arrested Urania earlier. Maybe he would have confessed even earlier, and then Allison's body could still be intact. It was a great tragedy for the whole family. It's an unimaginable pain that I'm going through, but she's in a better place where no one will hurt her, Yendri said. The trial of Nelson Sanchez Urania began on July 19, 2021. One of the witnesses at the trial was Allison's boyfriend, Harold Segura Solano. In his statement, he said Allison was at his house with his mother when he returned from work at about 6:30 p.m. on March 4, 2020. At some point, he left for 5 or 10 minutes. Upon returning, Harold saw that Allison had left without saying goodbye. He kept in touch with her through text messages while she was on her way home. After she got off the bus, she informed him that 2 men were following her. With that in mind, Harold insisted that she should take a taxi. He said he would pay the taxi driver himself, but Allison refused twice and texted him that she would run to her house. He didn't receive any more messages from her after that. However, according to him, he informed only his mother about the situation. He didn't contact Yendri, Allison's mother. He explained that he didn't do it because his phone's battery had run out, and then he fell asleep for 30 minutes. He discovered that his girlfriend was missing from Allison's aunt, who called him. From that moment on, he said he got scared and called Allison's cell phone several times, but all calls went straight to voicemail. WhatsApp messages were also not getting through. Harold indicated that he had been part of the search team for several days, but stopped because he did not feel fit and had to work. No doubt he wanted things to be different. If he could rewind time, he would have taken Allison home that evening, but unfortunately, nothing can be changed. On August 18, 2021, the court sentenced Nelson Sanchez Urania to 18 years in prison for taking the life of Allison Bonilla. He could have received twice the sentence, but the judge pointed out that there was no evidence to confirm that Urania knew about the path and time of Allison's return home and that he planned to attack her. Moreover, due to the condition of Allison's remains, there was no evidence that Urania had forced her into intimacy. But this is not the end of the story. Allison's family was very disappointed with the verdict. In their opinion, this was not a fair punishment. In 2022, the family's lawyer filed an appeal. The court overturned Urania's sentence and scheduled a new trial. On September 28, 2023, the court sentenced Nelson Sanchez Urania to 35 years in prison. Allison's family's lawyer pointed out that Urania acted wildly, cowardly, and inhumanly, and took advantage of the victim and her loved one's trust. According to the court, Urania's actions were premeditated. Allison had known Urania for several years, so he took advantage of this to commit a crime. Urania showed no remorse, and the criminal court took this into account. Despite feeling pain and anger, the family was happy with the new verdict, which finally closed this chapter of their lives, ending this nightmare that lasted more than 3 years. Allison's family placed a cross and laid flowers where she was found. They made for her something like a small altar with her photo and a statue of the Virgin Mary. The Allison Bonilla case has had a strong impact on Costa Rican media and social networks, even sparking several marches in memory of the young woman and other women who had previously suffered under similar circumstances, such as Maria Luisa Cedeno and Luani Salazar. A link to the story of Maria Luisa Cedeno should now appear on your screens. In today's deep dive, we peel back the layers of one of the UK's most calculated serial killers, a man who sought fame through the fear he instilled. We'll uncover the story of how he executed his plan with chilling precision and overshadowed a bustling city's celebratory spirit by a series of gruesome crimes. To understand the mind behind the moniker the Gay Slayer, we must delve into the past of Colin Ireland. Born in 1954 in Dartford, Kent, Ireland's early life was marked by turbulence, upheaval, and poverty. His childhood, spent in an unsettled home, was the first chapter in a life marked by discontent and detachment. Raised by a single mother, Ireland's formative years were a carousel of different men entering and leaving his life. This instability laid the groundwork for a personality that craved control, a trait that would later manifest in the most sinister ways. His parents were unmarried 17-year-olds. His father left soon after his birth, and Ireland didn't know his identity. Due to his mother's money problems, they had to move a number of times. In spite of all the hardships, Ireland had a close relationship with his mother and remembered her as affectionate and benevolent. Ireland said that as a child, he was a thin, lanky little runt, always getting the worst of it from schoolyard bullies. This made Ireland frequently miss school. As a result, he didn't get a proper education and became sad and withdrawn, choosing his few friends among the most unthreatening kids. As a teenager, Ireland found himself entangled with the law. His crimes, though initially petty, hinted at a deeper struggle within, a struggle for identity and a desperate need to assert his significance in a world where he felt invisible. Constantly in trouble of his own making, Ireland was sent to borstals and prisons for theft, robbery, blackmail, and burglary. He ran away to London at 16 and hung out in an amusement arcade with a bad reputation where young boys were targeted by pedophiles. Ireland was approached by some of them. Besides, one of his jobs was a bouncer on a gay club. That's where his understanding of gay subcultures came from. As Ireland himself described the 70s, I was entering what I call the lost period, common to those who suffer from psychopathy. In between custodial periods, a lot of the 70s were a blur. I spent my time detached and wondering. In 1982, Ireland married Virginia Zammit, who was confined to a wheelchair. His colleague witnessed a pleasant family life when he visited them. They divorced 5 years later after Ireland's adultery. In 1989, he married Janet Young. He was abusive and after 4 months left his wife abruptly when she was away for the weekend, stealing over £10,000 from her account and leaving her completely broke. He moved to Southend-on-Sea, Essex, roughly 60 kilometers east of London, and lived in a hostel there. Later, he moved to his own flat. There, in this flat, Ireland decided to become a serial killer as his New Year's resolution. Drifting through adulthood, Ireland's life was a patchwork of odd jobs and fleeting relationships. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, there was a growing fascination with infamy and a desire to etch his name into criminal history. Ireland immersed himself in the dark world of serial killers. He studied them, not with a sense of horror, but with an analytical eye. What made them tick? How did they elude capture? These were the questions that consumed him. He spent many hours reading about serial killers and learning about geographic profiling, hence deciding to commit his murders far away from his home. A killer usually commits crimes in a certain radius of about 7 miles from his home. That's why Ireland chose London for his crime scene. He also planned to have at least 5 victims, because he had read that a person needs to have such body count to qualify as a serial killer. The year 1993 witnessed a terrifying series of crimes that shook the core of London's LGBTQ+ community. Colin Ireland, a man whose unassuming demeanor masked a sinister agenda, embarked on a calculated campaign of terror, meticulously planning and executing a series of murders with chilling precision. Ireland's hunting ground was the vibrant gay scene of London. He frequented the Coleherne Pub, a known gay bar, seeking out his potential victims. Here, amid the pulsing music and crowded dance floor, Ireland would select and study his targets, plotting their fates with cold detachment. Ireland sought men who liked the passive role and S&M, so he could easily restrain them as they believed it was a sexual game. Members of the pub would wear color-coded handkerchiefs to indicate their sexual proclivities. Ireland was posing as a dominant partner. His first victim, Peter Walker, was a 45-year-old choreographer. Ireland met Walker at the Coleherne, and what started as a night of perceived intimacy quickly turned into a nightmare. Walker's body was discovered in his apartment, revealing the horror of Ireland's actions. Bound, gagged, and suffocated by a plastic bag placed over his head, Walker's death was just the beginning of Ireland's gruesome spree. Ireland placed 2 teddy bears in a sexual position on Walker's body and burned some of his pubic hair so he could smell it. While searching the flat, he discovered that Walker was HIV positive. Enraged, Ireland stuffed a condom into Walker's mouth and another one into his nostril. Each crime scene told a story of meticulous planning and ruthless execution. He carried a murder kit, a rope, handcuffs, and a change of clothing. Ireland left little evidence behind, confounding the police and instilling a growing sense of fear within the community. He was methodical, ensuring each scene was thoroughly cleaned, removing any traces that could lead back to him. He also stayed in the flat till morning to avoid suspicion from leaving in the middle of the night. To describe the nights after his murders, Ireland said, "I think that affected me mentally to quite a degree, sitting with his body for 5 to 6 hours, watching him gradually get blotches, go cold. It wasn't something that I could cope with, to be honest." Ireland disposed of all the things he touched by throwing them out of a train window on his way back to Southend. When the police discovered the body, they assumed it was the result of a sexual game gone wrong. 2 months later, Ireland returned to the pub where he met 37-year-old librarian Christopher Dunn, who invited Ireland to his flat. Ireland tied, handcuffed, then beat and tortured his helpless victim before suffocating him by stuffing pieces of cloth into his mouth. After murdering him, Ireland used Dunn's PIN and bank card to withdraw $200 from his account. The police assumed it was an accident as a result of a sex game and didn't link his death to Walker's. Ireland was getting more and more confident as his New Year's resolution was coming together. Ireland met 35-year-old businessman Perry Bradley III at the Coleherne Pub. He was the son of Texas Democratic Party fundraiser Perry Bradley Jr. In his Kensington flat, Bradley refused to be tied. but Ireland told him that he couldn't perform sexually without it. Bradley reluctantly agreed, and then Ireland told him that he was a thief and he just wanted his money and PIN. After Bradley gave Ireland his PIN, Ireland told him that he should try to fall asleep, as he wouldn't leave his flat till morning. Bradley did fall asleep, and Ireland realized that Bradley could identify him and strangled him. Then he placed a doll on top of the dead man's body. The heinous crimes of Colin Ireland not only sent shockwaves through the communities he targeted, but also captured the relentless gaze of the media. The press dubbed him the Gay Slayer, a moniker that sensationalized his horrific acts and underscored the homophobic undercurrents of the time. Within 3 days, on June 7th, Ireland was back at the Coleherne. He met 33-year-old Andrew Collier, a housing warden, and went to his home. Again, Ireland handcuffed and tied his victim to the bed, demanding his bank details. After killing Collier's cat, Ireland strangled Collier. He placed a condom on Collier's penis and fastened the dead cat's mouth over it, and put the cat's tail into Collier's mouth. On June 15th, Ireland met Maltese chef Emanuele Spiteri. Aged 41, he cuffed, bound, and strangled his victim, then stayed in his flat watching TV and eating Spiteri's food. After cleaning the scene, Ireland set fire to the flat, but it only caused minor damage. As the body count rose, so did the alarm. The gay community, already marginalized, now found itself in the grip of a predator who walked among them, unseen, unknown, and deadly. But what was the motive behind these abhorrent acts? Was it a deep-seated animosity towards the gay community, or something more cold and calculated? And what were the critical mistakes Ireland made, and how did they lead to his capture? As the death toll rose, London's Metropolitan Police found themselves grappling with a cunning predator. The investigation into Colin Ireland's crimes was a race against time, a complex puzzle that demanded not just diligence, but innovation in the face of a killer who seemed always one step ahead. Initially, the investigation faced significant challenges. Ireland's careful planning and meticulous cleanup at each crime scene left frustratingly few clues. The killer's methodical approach in disguising his identity and movements compounded the difficulty, turning the investigation into a labyrinthine task. Detectives were confronted with a disturbing pattern. All victims were men from the gay community, their bodies discovered in their own homes, a sign of trust, brutally exploited. This realization led to a focused investigation in London's gay scene, particularly around the Coleherne pub where Ireland hunted for his victims. The breakthrough came from meticulous police work and a stroke of luck. A forgotten fingerprint at a crime scene, a chance capture on one of London's first CCTV cameras. These were the pivotal moments that began to unravel Ireland's web of deceit. When Ireland was in Andrew Collier's flat, they heard a noise outside and came up to the window. Ireland gripped a horizontal metal bar across the window and forgot to wipe it off. The police then found these fingerprints. And finally, Ireland was captured on CCTV. Some witnesses said Spiteri left Coleherne with a man. Then police traced his route home. His train journey went through Charing Cross Station, fitted with one of London's first CCTV cameras. Each piece of evidence was a precious key, unlocking parts of a puzzle that Ireland thought he had so carefully hidden. But what was it that finally led to Ireland's downfall? How did the police connect the dots in a case that seemed to defy resolution? The relentless pursuit of justice in the Colin Ireland case turned a crucial corner with a single, seemingly innocuous phone call. Ireland, emboldened by his actions, made a call to the police, taunting them about his crimes. The day after Peter Walker's murder, having heard no news reports of his crime, he anonymously called the Samaritans and the Sun, telling them that he had murdered Walker and locked his dogs in another room. Later, the police received a call from Dunn's killer taunting them because they had failed to link his death to Walker's. In his next anonymous call to the police, he asked, "Are you still interested in the death of Peter Walker? Why have you stopped the investigation? Doesn't the death of a homosexual man mean anything? I will do another. I have always dreamed of doing the perfect murder." After Collier's death, Ireland called Kensington police and said that he had killed 4 men and they had to stop him. He told the police that he had read many books on serial killers and said, "If you don't stop me, it will be 1 a week." He told the police that he had studied the FBI manual, that is, Whoever Fights Monsters, by ex-FBI agent and serial killer specialist Robert Ressler. "I have got the book," he said. "I know how many you have to do." Ireland later said that the TV crime series, The Bill, had also given him many of his ideas and police evasion methods. Forensic psychologist Professor Michael Brooks said, "Just because you read books about serial killers doesn't mean you have any interest in becoming a serial killer yourself. But if that is your motive, then actually reading books can give you an awareness of the ways in which serial killers have acted in the past." Armed with this new evidence, the police intensified their efforts. A suspect started to take shape from the shadows. It was a breakthrough moment in the investigation, a lead that they desperately needed. On 19th of July, 1993, Ireland went to his solicitor. He said that he was on the CCTV, but that he had not killed Spiteri. He went to his flat for sex, but there was another man. He didn't want a threesome and left. The investigation took a dramatic turn as law enforcement officers matched Ireland's fingerprint to the Collier crime scene. His arrest was a moment of triumph mixed with stark horror as the extent of his crimes came to light. Ireland's overconfidence combined with advanced police work and the critical clues helped bring the killer to justice. The capture of Colin Ireland was more than just the conclusion of a manhunt. It was a moment that brought some semblance of closure to the victims' families and a community shaken by fear. It also opened up vital conversations about the safety of marginalized groups. The trial of Colin Ireland was set to be a gripping chapter in British legal history, a case built on a foundation of solid evidence. Ireland, facing overwhelming evidence, made a decision that stunned the courtroom. He confessed to his crimes, detailing them with a cold detachment that sent shivers down the spines of all present. His confession was not just an admission of guilt, but a hair-raising narrative of his calculated and brutal actions. Ironically, pleading guilty to all his murders and confessing, Ireland avoided the publicity he so deeply craved. The heart of the trial, however, lay in the stories of the victims. Their lives, tragically lost, remind us of the human cost of hate and prejudice. Were these 5 murders Ireland's only crimes? Or did he kill others? Serial killers often withhold some of their murders from the police to gain a sense of control over them, even in prison. In January 1993, soon after Ireland's resolution, the police found a dead gay man in his home in Soho. They believed this might have been done by Ireland. However, the gay slayer never claimed this crime. Along with his other victims, a perilous shadow loomed over Hollywood star Tom Cruise. In a chilling twist of fate, Cruise, then at the height of his career and married to Nicole Kidman, narrowly escaped a potentially fatal encounter. According to statements and police files that later surfaced, Ireland had spotted Cruise in a London bar in 1993. Driven by a perilous and misguided belief, Ireland falsely assumed Cruise to be gay and plotted to make him one of his victims. The killer's sinister plan was unexpectedly thwarted. Cruise, possibly sensing something amiss or merely coincidental in his timing, left the bar abruptly, eluding Ireland's grasp. Ireland's conviction was a foregone conclusion, but the sentencing phase was a crucial moment. The judge, in a powerful address, condemned Ireland's actions, emphasizing the gravity and premeditated nature of the crimes. The judge called Ireland exceptionally frightening and dangerous. He said to him, "To take 1 human life is an outrage. To take 5 is carnage. In my view, it is absolutely clear you should never be released." Ireland was sentenced to 5 counts of life imprisonment for the murders. But the story does not end with Ireland's conviction. There are unconfirmed rumors that Ireland strangled his cellmate, a convicted child killer, in Wakefield Prison, Yorkshire. After that, he was transferred to maximum security lodgings at Whitemoor Prison, Cambridgeshire, into a private cell of his own. His pattern of selecting victims, meticulous planning, and the psychological games played with law enforcement are now studied in criminal psychology courses worldwide. Moreover, the investigation into Ireland's crimes highlighted the importance of community involvement in criminal cases. The breakthroughs in this case were a result of not just police work, but also the cooperation of the community, which had been terrorized by his actions. Ireland's case became a catalyst for discussions about homophobia and hate crimes. It highlighted the urgent need for societal change, not just in policy, but in everyday attitudes and understanding. Ireland died on 21st February 2012 of pulmonary fibrosis and a fractured hip he had suffered earlier. Former prison governor Vanessa Frake, who had crossed paths with numerous hardened criminals, called Ireland the most frightening prisoner she has ever come across. She said, "I don't know what it was about him. He just emanated evil." He was proud of what he did, same as many other serial killers. What drives a man to commit such calculated and brutal acts of violence? To understand Ireland's psyche, we delve into the complex labyrinth of his mind, piecing together a profile that is as disturbing as it is intriguing. Experts who have studied Ireland's case point to a combination of factors. His troubled childhood, marked by instability and lack of a father figure, may have sown the seeds of his later behavior, but it was his deep-seated desire for recognition, a craving to leave a mark on the world that propelled him into the abyss of serial killing. Ireland's methodical approach to his crimes suggests a high level of intelligence and planning. He studied serial killers, not with repulsion, but with a scholar's interest. He learned from their mistakes, aiming not just to evade capture, but to master the art of killing. Ireland's methodical approach to his crimes offers a chilling glimpse into the mindset of a serial killer. His need for control and recognition, coupled with his ability to blend into society, challenges our understanding of criminal behavior. Forensic psychologists theorize that Ireland's choice of victims from the gay community was strategic rather than personal. He saw them as easy targets, vulnerable due to societal marginalization. This choice reflects not just a cold-blooded strategy, but a chilling indifference to human life. He said about how he chose his victims, "I think it's been something that's been triggered in me some time before. I felt if I was approached, it was likely that I would kill. I thought to myself, if I wasn't approached, something wouldn't have happened. I would have gone on my way and nothing would have happened." Forensic psychologist Professor Michael Brooks explained, what he does is he reduces the chance of choosing an inappropriate victim or somebody who wasn't going to respond by not selecting those who didn't approach him. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Ireland's psychology is his lack of remorse. His confessions were devoid of emotion, his recounting of the crimes clinical. This detachment points to a possible psychopathic personality, where empathy and conscience are alarmingly absent. Detective Inspector Martin Finnegan said, "He was very factual about his acts, as if he was describing someone else's activities. Absolutely no compassion at all. I didn't detect much hatred. It was just matter of fact, like, I went down the shops and bought this, went into the flat and killed him." In most cases, the murderers who kill gay people are gay themselves, and those blatantly homophobic are often secretly gay. Was it really a plausible excuse for Ireland to give in to his secret emotions? Ireland compared the buzz of his first kill to that of losing his virginity. Maybe these hidden feelings brought this simile to his mind. Was Ireland just dishonest with himself and others, trying to hide what he really couldn't control? Ireland said he was heterosexual and didn't touch or have sex with the men he killed. However, it's difficult to imagine that at least 5 people invited him to his flat for sex, undressed, and let Ireland tie them without even a single kiss. Can a person even decide to become a serial killer as a career just for the sake of it, without any ulterior motives? And choose the specifics of his crimes by pure logic? Or is it something deeper? Or was theft the real reason of Ireland's crimes, and murdering his victims was a calculated move to prevent them from identifying him later? There's inconsistency in Ireland's story about the murder of Perry Bradley. He said that he had promised Bradley to leave him alive, but then it occurred to him that Bradley could identify him. This narrative strongly contradicts with his whole intention of choosing his victims for murder to gain fame from becoming a serial killer. Was Ireland just exploiting homophobic moods in the society to mask the mercenary nature of his crimes, hoping that it will win him sympathy of the public and reduce the term of his imprisonment? This case is of India's first famous perfume expert, Monica Gould. The reason for Monica's murder and the method used by the killer shook the entire India. The date was actually October 6, 2016. Monica Gould resided in the village named Sangolda in the famous state of Goa in India. Goa is known for its famous beaches, culture, climate, and historical places. Besides, here you can also get a chance to witness colorful architecture, greenery, and beautiful sunsets daily. Actually, Monica lived in a 3-bedroom rented apartment in a society named Sapna Raj Valley in Sangolda village. As usual, at around 9 to 10 in the morning, Monica's maid arrives at her house and rings the doorbell of Monica's apartment. However, there is no response from inside. Then the maid rings the bell again, but still no response. Then she tries calling out several times and rings the bell 3 or 4 more times. Additionally, she knocks on the door, but still there is no sound from inside and no one opens the door. This situation feels very strange to the maid because Monica has never done this before. Feeling a little anxious now, she calls Monica's brother, Anand Gurda, who lives in Mumbai, and explains the entire situation to him. After this, Monica's brother Anand calls Monica's phone, but there is no response from the other end. He keeps trying to connect with his sister through calls, but Monica doesn't pick up the phone. After that, Anand calls Monica's neighbor, who lived in the adjacent apartment, and Monica had also left a duplicate key to her. Shortly after Anand's call, the woman arrives outside Monica's house with the duplicate key. She then opens the door with the same duplicate key, and as soon as Monica's neighbor and her maid enter the house, both scream because Monica was lying straight on the bed. Her hands were tied behind the bed, and there was no clothing on the lower part of her body. Additionally, Monica was not moving at all. Seeing all this, Monica's neighbor immediately calls the police. Soon after, the Goa police arrive at Monica's apartment with some lady police officers, an ambulance, and doctors. However, when some doctors cover Monica's body and check her pulse, it is found that Monica has passed away. Afterwards, the dead body is sent for postmortem, and then the room is searched. The police searched the room, but the surprising thing was that there was no evidence of forced entry anywhere in the entire apartment. There were eggshells in the room, suggesting they had been eaten recently. Then Monica's purse was checked, but apart from some debit card bills, the police found no evidence in it. Now, to find evidence, the police consider examining all the CCTV footage in the society. But then they find out that there are no CCTV cameras installed in that society. Besides this, the police also question the people living in Sapna Raj Valley. However, nobody has seen any suspicious person entering or leaving Monica's house in the past day. Nevertheless, the police also investigate from the angle of theft, but nothing was missing from Monica's flat that could indicate that this murder was committed for theft. Looking at all these things, the police believe that whoever murdered Monica had some information about her because no one forcefully entered the flat and nothing was stolen from the house. However, Monica was married, but due to some disputes, she had been living alone for a year. Therefore, the police's suspicion first falls on Monica's husband, Bharath Ramanrutham. After that, the police interrogate him about this murder, but nothing comes to light during the interrogation that would make them suspect him. In fact, Monica was the daughter of a former judge in Mumbai, Ramesh Kuda, and she was initially a photographer, but later she started researching on perfumes. After this, in a short span of time, she became a successful perfume expert. Due to her profession, Monica was quite famous not only in her society, but also throughout the city, often seen hobnobbing with big businessmen. Therefore, as soon as news of Monica's murder surfaced, the entire state of Goa was in shock. At that time, this was the news running on every news channel in the country, and the public wanted to know who the mystery killer was. Meanwhile, Monica's postmortem report also arrives, revealing that Monica died due to suffocation, and it also becomes clear that she was raped. Anyway, the police had investigated the case from every angle so far, but they had neither found any suspects nor any clues. But then, during the investigation that evening, a police officer suddenly remembers that they had found some debit card bills from Monica's purse, but they hadn't found any debit card during the entire search. Afterwards, the Goa police approach the bank regarding the bills of that debit card and request to check the transaction details of that card. It is found out that on the morning of October 6th at 6 o'clock, this card was used at an ATM in Porvorim area. Porvorim is merely 4 to 5 kilometers away from Sapnaraj Valley. Following this, the police instruct the bank to keep an eye on this card and also scrutinize the CCTV footage of the ATM in Porvorim. The face of the boy who withdrew money from that card was captured on the ATM camera. Subsequently, with the CCTV footage in hand, the Goa police reach Sapnaraj Valley. As soon as the locals see this footage, they recognize the boy shown in the footage immediately and identify him as Raj Kumar, who used to be the old security guard here. However, he was fired from his job 2 months ago on charges of theft. For the Goa police, this was a major success because for the first time in this case, the police had a name and a face of suspect. Now, when the police check Rajkumar's background, they find out that Rajkumar, 21, is from Bathinda city in Punjab state, and there have been several theft cases registered against him before. The police had all the information about Rajkumar, but the challenge now was how to catch him. So, to catch Rajkumar, the Goa police started waiting for the next transaction from Monica's debit card. Some time passes, and suddenly the police find out that recently, some money has been withdrawn from an ATM in Bangalore city using this card. Let us tell you that Bangalore city is about 370 miles away from Sangolda village. Upon seeing this, the Goa police immediately spring into action and contact the Bangalore city police. After that, Bangalore police checked the CCTV footage of that ATM, and Rajkumar's face was clearly visible in the footage of that ATM as well. Following this, Bangalore police took Rajkumar's photo and began questioning all hotels and lodges around that ATM. After a while, a man at the reception of one hotel recognizes Rajkumar's photo and says, "Yes, a man with this face is staying in our hotel, but he has gone out for some work right now." Afterwards, some police officers dressed in civilian clothes stand outside the same hotel, waiting for Rajkumar to arrive. But as soon as Rajkumar returns to the hotel after a while, the police officers recognize him and apprehend him. Now, because the police officers were in civilian clothes, Rajkumar doesn't even recognize them. And just like that, on October 8th, 2016, 2 days after Monica's murder, Rajkumar is arrested from a hotel in Bangalore. Then Goa police are contacted. Afterwards, the Goa police arrive in Bangalore and take Rajkumar to Goa with transit remand from the court. Now, the interrogation begins, and due to the firm questioning by the police, Rajkumar admits to killing Monica. When the police ask him why he did it, he narrates his entire story to the police, and the story goes something like this. Actually, in the month of June, 39-year-old Monica decides to shift to Goa for her perfume business, for which Monica starts looking for a rented flat, and on June 7th, 2016, she reaches Sapnaraj Valley to see a flat. At the society's gate, Monica meets security guard Rajkumar, and the society's management had already called Rajkumar beforehand, informing him that a woman would come to see a flat, so show her the flat. Afterwards, Rajkumar shows Monica the flat, and after seeing it, Monica leaves from there. But what happens here is that during showing the flat, Rajkumar falls in love with Monica unilaterally. Now, day and night, he kept thinking only about Monica. About 4 to 5 days pass like this, and then one day Rajkumar becomes very happy because that day Monica had come to shift to Sapnaraj Valley with her belongings. After that, Monica tells Rajkumar that the flat he showed her, he has taken that flat. Now, because Rajkumar was very happy, he himself, with the help of 2 people, delivers Monica's belongings to her apartment. Rajkumar does this because he wanted to see Monica repeatedly, but because he was a security guard, He didn't get many chances to see and meet Monica. But then one day an idea comes to his mind, and he goes to his manager and says that he wants to do the cleaning and maintenance work of the society's cars along with his duty, because he is in desperate need of money. After hearing Rajkumar's need, the manager also agrees to his proposal because he thinks that this way Rajkumar will earn some extra money, and the needs of the people living in the society will also be fulfilled. However, Rajkumar had something else in his mind, and after this, he goes straight to Monica's apartment. After that, he tells Monica that now he can also clean her car, but it will cost her some extra money. Monica also agrees to this because she didn't have enough time to do household chores while handling her business. Now, Rajkumar started cleaning Monica's car and would use the pretext of exchanging keys to also visit Monica's apartment, where he would see Monica 3 or 4 times a day. But it was due to the cleaning of this very car that one day Rajkumar loses his job. It so happened that one day, Monica's umbrella went missing from this car. Monica asks Rajkumar about it, but he says he didn't see any umbrella in the car. After this, Monica complains to the society management and says that today, not only my umbrella, but many other persons' things have gone missing just like before. If such incidents continue to happen in the society, it will tarnish its reputation. Now, after hearing Monica's complaint, the society management takes this matter seriously and begins an investigation. It is then found out that only Rajkumar used to open Monica's car for cleaning, besides Monica herself. After that, a search is conducted in the guard room where Rajkumar used to stay, and Monica's umbrella is also recovered from there. Now, since thefts were already a concern in society, after Monica's umbrella is found, suspicion falls entirely on Rajkumar. As a result, on July 22, 2016, Rajkumar is dismissed from his job on theft charges. From here, the story takes a new turn. While Rajkumar had deeply loved Monica before, now he starts to harbor a significant amount of hatred towards her. However, after being dismissed from his job, Rajkumar leaves and starts working as a laborer in the Ponda area of Goa. But even there, he only works for a few days. During this time, he meets Monica twice and asks her to withdraw the theft complaint, but Monica flatly refuses. Now, hearing this, Rajkumar gets even angrier, but he couldn't do anything at that moment. After that, Rajkumar arrives in Chennai in search of a job, then goes to Mumbai from there, and finally spends some time working in Pune city. Everywhere, Rajkumar earns his living by doing odd jobs, but when he doesn't find any decent job anywhere, he returns to Goa on the 2nd of October 2016. But this time, he had something planned in Goa. There was still a lot of hatred against Monica in his mind. The very next day, that is, on the 3rd of October in the afternoon, Rajkumar reaches Sapnaraj Valley again. He enters the society through the main gate, and by chance, no one sees him entering. Then he goes straight to Monica's apartment below, but he notices that Monica's car is not parked there. Seeing this, he understands that Monica is not at home at the moment. However, instead of leaving from there, Rajkumar decides to wait for Monica to arrive in the society. Now, because Rajkumar knows every route in the society, he decides to hide on the terrace of the society because, generally, no one comes to the terrace. Meanwhile, Rajkumar keeps looking down repeatedly and checks Monica's car, but even after the whole October 3rd passes, Monica's car is not seen. Then the next day, October 4th comes, but Monica's car still doesn't show up, and then October 4th also passes. On October 5th, Monica's car was checked several times by Rajkumar since morning, but it wasn't seen. Now, it had been almost 2 days since he stayed on the terrace. There was neither food to eat nor anything to drink on the terrace during this time. Many times, Rajkumar felt like leaving from there, but the fire of revenge didn't let him go, and fueled by this vengeance, Rajkumar spent more than 48 hours hungry and thirsty on the terrace. Around 3 to 3:30 p.m. on October 5th, 2016, Rajkumar came down once again, and this time he saw Monica's car parked. This meant that Monica had returned home. Seeing this, there was a strange smile on Rajkumar's face, but then he went back to the terrace and started waiting for darkness. After that, He comes downstairs around 6:30 in the evening and rings Monica's flat doorbell. When Monica asks who, Rajkumar identifies himself as a security supervisor. Hearing this, Monica opens the door, but as soon as she does, Rajkumar forcefully pushes her and then shuts the door from inside. Before Monica can comprehend anything, Rajkumar takes out a knife from his pocket and warns her, "If you make noise, I'll stab you." Still, Monica screams loudly to protect herself, but Rajkumar covers her mouth with his hand. Then Rajkumar takes Monica to the bathroom, intimidating and controlling her. After that, he forcefully takes Monica to the bedroom at knife point, lays her on the bed, ties both her hands behind the bed first, then ties both her legs as well. Now, Rajkumar demands money from Monica at knife point. Upon seeing herself trapped, Monica also gets very nervous, so she tells the Rajkumar, "Take all the money in the purse." After that, the Rajkumar empties Monica's entire purse. About 4,000 Indian rupees come out of the purse, like $48. But the Rajkumar's desire is not satisfied with that, and he asks Monica for more money. So Monica says, "I only have this much money right now. If you need more money, I have a debit card. Take it and withdraw money from the ATM." The Rajkumar didn't know how to use a debit card. Still, he learns from Monica how to use it. So, systematically, Monica tells him the way to withdraw money, how to insert the card into the ATM machine, then select the language, and then how to enter the secret PIN. And along with that, she also tells him her debit card's PIN number. I think, maybe in that situation, Monica feels that now Rajkumar will leave her and go from here. Then she will complain to the police and Rajkumar will be caught through the location of the debit card. But Rajkumar takes the money and card and puts a cloth in Monica's mouth. After doing all this, he now knew that Monica could not do anything, so he leaves from there with great confidence and then goes to the kitchen. He takes out water from the fridge, boils the eggs, eats them with great ease, and there was no hurry for him. He was eating and drinking with great comfort because he knew that Monica lived alone in that flat. Now, he also takes out ice cream from the fridge and eats it. Besides, he also eats chocolate, meaning that all the hunger and thirst he had been suffering for 2 days on the terrace is satisfied now. It was around 12 o'clock at night by all this. When his stomach is full again, he returns to Monica. He takes her phone, although it was locked, but Rajkumar's unlock it by forcing Monica. Then Rajkumar opens an adult site on her phone and forcibly shows her 3 adult videos. Feeling all this, Monica becomes even more anxious because she realized that Rajkumar was not going to let her go now. Then Rajkumar unties the rope from Monica's legs and removes all the clothes from her waist down. Then he fulfills his desire that had been in his mind since the first day he saw Monica. It was nearly 2 a.m. in the morning by now, and Rajkumar had been in Monica's apartment for almost 8 hours. When Rajkumar's desire was filled, he gets nervous for the first time when the question arises in his mind whether Monica knows him well, and if he leaves Monica alive, she will tell the police about it, and then the Rajkumar will be punished. So the prince lifted a pillow from the same bed and began to suffocate Monica's mouth and kept pressing until she died. Then the Rajkumar got up from there comfortably and went to the bathroom again. After that, Rajkumar shaved his beard, then he bathed, and at 3:30 a.m. on October 6, 2016, in the darkness, he sneaked out of the Sapna Valley stealthily. Then at 6 a.m., after withdrawing money from the ATM, he went to Bangalore, where the police arrested him. After hearing the entire story, all the police officers were quite surprised. After that, the Goa police gathers all the evidence against Rajkumar. Then, on January 6, 2017, a 228-page charge sheet is present in court, charging murder, rape, and robbery. However, the trial of this case is still ongoing. Let's see when the criminal will be punished. If there is any update in this case, we will update you through the channel's community post. So friends, this was the complete story of the Monica Gurd murder case. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alicia Canales Maguire. On September 20th, 2017, around 1:55 a.m., a series of events unfolded in Everett, Washington. Multiple people dialed 911 after being startled by loud bangs. 10 minutes after the initial calls, police officers arrived at the scene, where they were met with a horrific sight. 24-year-old Alicia Canales McGuire lay dead on the doorstep, just outside the door. Investigators cracked this heartbreaking case thanks to social media and CCTV footage. Born on October 29, 1992 in Mount Vernon, Washington, Alicia was the daughter of Manuel and Michelle Canales. Throughout her adult life, she worked as a caregiver, driven by her passion for helping others. Raised on a farm, Alicia started working at the age of 5, which instilled in her the value of hard work. She often returned to the family farm to lend a hand. Alicia cherished family time, regularly visiting and speaking with her loved ones, never failing to express her love when bidding them farewell. Alicia lived in Birdsview with her husband Bradley. The couple got married in a beautiful beach ceremony at Deception Pass in July 2017. However, the investigators soon discovered that Alicia didn't reside in the house where she died. Instead, it was her sister Amanda Canales' home, where Amanda lived with her 3 kids. Amanda had a work commitment in New York and asked Alicia to take care of her children during her absence. Alicia, who adored her nephew and nieces, was more than happy to help out. There was a staying nanny in the house with her, and she was one of those who called 911. She woke up to the sound of gunshots, and when she went downstairs, she saw that Alicia was lying at the front door and not moving. The police officers who arrived at the scene took immediate action, beginning with a thorough examination of the house to rule out the possibility that the perpetrator was still inside. They conducted a meticulous search, confirming that only the nanny and Amanda's children were present in the house. Once the frightened children had been safely removed from the house, the police commenced their investigation for evidence. A car parked in front of the house caught their attention, with shell casings discovered nearby, indicating that the shooter had been standing beside the vehicle, just before the front door. Several bullets had hit the door frame, and Alicia's lifeless body was found lying face down, right outside the door. It didn't resemble a robbery. The house was tidy, and it seemed as though the perpetrator hadn't even stepped inside. But who would want Alicia dead, and what could be the motive behind it? When the detectives found out that it was her sister's house, they began to suspect that it was a case of mistaken identity. Perhaps Amanda was the target, but she was in New York when the crime occurred. The nanny, a witness who was present in the house at the time of the crime, provided a calm and coherent account to the investigators. During questioning, she explained that she was upstairs when she heard the sound of gunshots. Upon looking down, she saw Alicia lying face down on the floor, motionless. However, she did not see the perpetrator of the shooting. Startled, the nanny immediately called 911. The nanny gave the police the first crucial lead. She reported that Amanda, Alicia's sister, had problems with her ex-husband, Kevin Lewis. The detectives pored over the reports from the local sheriff's office and discovered that this was not the first time someone had called the police to that address. Every prior incident involved domestic disputes between Amanda and Kevin Lewis, which caught the detectives' attention. They obtained Kevin Lewis's home address, situated in a different part of Everett, and paid him a visit before dawn to conduct an interview. Although his house was shrouded in darkness, Kevin responded to their knock on the door. During the conversation, the officers asked Kevin if he knew where his ex-wife was, and he replied that she should be at home. He looked like he had just woken up. The detectives asked him to tell them where he had spent the night, and he said he had been at home all night, with his sister and mother able to confirm this. He didn't ask what was the reason for the detectives' visit. When the detectives told Kevin about the shooting at his children's residence, he remained impassive, which raised suspicions. A typical parent would have asked about their children's well-being, but Kevin didn't. The detectives then informed Kevin that Amanda was out of town on business, to which he reacted with apparent surprise, saying, "Really?" Next, the detectives investigated neighboring houses and discovered that 2 of them had surveillance cameras that could corroborate or contradict Kevin's alibi. The footage revealed that Kevin's claim of staying home all night was false. A car was seen pulling up to his driveway approximately 40 minutes before the attack on Alicia. The footage showed someone resembling Kevin leaving the house, entering the car, and driving away. Although the recording quality was poor, the police couldn't positively identify the individual. A closer review of footage from another camera provided additional details about the car. While they couldn't identify the vehicle's make, they noticed that the front right rim was a different color from the other 3 light-colored rims. The car returned to Kevin's neighborhood about 20 minutes before the 911 calls reporting the shooting started. The person who had entered the car earlier returned to the house and went back inside. Amanda learned about her sister Alicia's death a few hours later, while she was in New York. When the investigators asked Amanda if she thought her ex-husband Kevin could have been the one who shot Alicia, she replied that she had no doubt it was him. Even though their 8-year marriage had ended, Amanda was still not ready to fully acknowledge how toxic the relationship with her ex-husband had been. Amanda was deeply unhappy throughout their marriage. Even after their divorce in June 2017, Kevin's threats continued to intimidate her. He had physically abused her in the past, and despite their separation, he remained a threat. After the divorce, Amanda was awarded full custody of their 3 children, and Kevin was ordered to pay $800 monthly in child support. However, he repeatedly violated the restraining order, showing up outside her home and terrifying both Amanda and their children. Despite these violations, the police never charged Kevin with any crime. Amanda suffered a severe beating in her driveway just a few weeks before her sister's death. One night, she arrived home late and parked her car next to her house. As she opened the door, someone attacked her. The assault happened so quickly that she didn't get a glimpse of the attacker's face. Nevertheless, she was certain who was responsible: Kevin Lewis, 30, who would later become the prime suspect in the murder of Alicia Canales McGuire, Amanda's sister. The investigators believed that he intended to take the life of his ex-wife. Kevin did not know that she was in New York during that time, and he didn't know that Amanda had asked Alicia to look after her children while she was away. However, there was an inconsistency in this theory. If the man in the footage was really Kevin, it meant he was at his house at the time of the shooting. In addition, his sister and mother provided him with an alibi. The police continued their investigation, exploring various explanations for what had occurred. They revisited Amanda's house to re-examine the scene, including the path the bullets took. According to experts, Alicia was shot when the door was ajar, and the shooter fired at least 7 times, with the shots coming from outside the house and entering it. The evidence gathered at the scene suggested that the shooter stood next to the garage, firing initially, before moving towards the door and firing again from inside it. The medical examiner identified the cause of Alicia's death as multiple gunshot wounds to the head and torso. She got struck by 5 shots, and 2 of the wounds showed gunpowder stippling injury. The medical examiner testified that he could not determine the sequence of the 5 shots, but said that the last 2 gunshot wounds to the head were probably the last 2 wounds inflicted. According to the experts, the 7 shell casings found at the crime scene were fired from the same firearm, and the bullet wounds to Alicia's head were inflicted at close range. The investigators analyzed this theory, but didn't find any evidence confirming this. The shell casings found at the crime scene also attracted the attention of the police because this brand of casings was not very common. They were Russian-made casings manufactured under the Tulamo brand. Since it was not a very common brand, the investigators hoped they would identify the seller of these cartridges and maybe even the buyer. The investigators found that Walmart had sold .40 caliber cartridges of a specific brand, with one of the stores located near the crime scene. Walmart representatives informed the detectives that a man had recently bought 9mm Tulamo cartridges, and they had CCTV footage of the transaction. The detectives promptly visited Walmart to review the footage, which was recorded on September 18th, 2 days prior to Alicia's death. They initially suspected that Kevin Lewis might be the buyer, but they were mistaken. The man in the footage was not Kevin, and he had paid using a credit card. The investigators looked into this individual and discovered no connection to Kevin Lewis, Amanda, or the nanny, forcing them to search for new evidence. After thoroughly examining all the existing theories, the investigators approached Amanda to gather new information about Kevin. Initially, Amanda stated that their relationship was okay during the honeymoon phase, but Kevin's behavior gradually became more aggressive, culminating in physical abuse. Their tumultuous relationship ultimately ended in divorce, with a restraining order issued against Kevin and Amanda gaining full custody of their children. Despite her emotional distress, Amanda firmly believed that Alicia's death was a case of mistaken identity, convinced that the intended target was actually herself. She suspected that Lewis had orchestrated the attack, but the police found that Kevin had a solid alibi, as he was at home during the time of the shooting. The investigators have again reviewed the footage taken on the night of Alicia's death. Now they noticed something they hadn't noticed before. This low-quality recording shows Kevin, or the man who left his house, walking up to the car and getting into the back seat behind the driver. But why didn't he get into the front passenger seat? In search of an answer, the investigators concluded that someone else was already sitting in the front passenger seat. Therefore, by the time the car pulled up to Kevin Lewis's house, there were probably already 2 people in it, and perhaps that's why he had to sit in the back seat. The police had no evidence to link Kevin to Alicia's death. However, they gathered evidence of Kevin's attacks on his ex-wife Amanda and arrested him in November 2018. The court sentenced him to 3 years in prison. More than a year had passed since Alicia's death, but the case remained unsolved. Then, in 2019, a breakthrough finally occurred when a woman contacted the police station with crucial information. She provided a tip that a girl who lived in nearby Spokane had been overheard bragging at a party about being hired to kill someone on York Road, the same road where Alicia was fatally shot. Although the police were initially skeptical, given that Spokane is about 5 hours away from Everett, they decided to investigate further. The woman who called said she was at a party where she met a young woman who introduced herself as Angelica. The latter bragged about how she and her boyfriend participated in the crime. According to this woman, Angelica said someone died because of a shot in the head, and they were shooting from around the corner and were hired by the children's father. Moreover, Angelica said they took the wrong person's life. It was a case of mistaken identity. The police never publicly disclosed the details of this case, but investigators and family members were aware that Alicia had been fatally shot in the head. Since Angelica possessed knowledge of the crime's specifics, the police became intrigued by her information. During their search for Angelica, investigators discovered that her real name was Alexis Hale. On her social media, they found photos of her posing with a 9mm pistol, which may have been the murder weapon. Additionally, there were several videos showing a man in the background, later identified as Alexis's boyfriend, Jadon Phelps. On the night of Alicia's death, Alexis Hale posted a video filmed through the windshield of a car, analyzing the road signs. The investigators determined the exact location of this car at that moment. It was about a 10-minute drive from Kevin Lewis's house. In the following video taken a few hours after Alicia's death, Jadon Phelps bragged about a wad of money. The investigators saw 5 comments under Phelps's photo on social media, and one of the comments was from his aunt, whom they recognized as Kevin Lewis's mother. It turned out that Jadon Phelps was Kevin's cousin. The police had sufficient evidence to make arrests. The first person they detained was Alexis Hale, who was 17 years old. As the officers handcuffed her, she protested, claiming they had no right to arrest her due to her age, yet she seemed aware of the reasons behind her arrest. She promptly requested a lawyer. Meanwhile, in a different part of the city, the police took Jedon Phelps into custody. The investigators used Phelps and Hale's phone records to show that they had driven from Spokane to Everett to carry out the shooting. Security footage from Lewis's neighbors showed someone getting into a car in the early hours of September 20th. The man in a white top left at 11:13 a.m. and returned at 1:37 a.m. When the police went to see Lewis after Alicia's death, he was wearing a white top. Alexis remained silent with the investigators. At the time, Kevin Lewis, now known as Kevin, was serving a 3-year prison sentence for assaulting Amanda. The investigators turned to Phelps, the one who had arranged the crime, hoping to gather information. As they suspected, Phelps confessed and revealed the name of the man who had hired him, Kevin Lewis. The police took Phelps to the crime scene where he provided further details of the crime. Phelps initially just showed them where the house was, and they were taking him back to his home. Later, when they went back, Phelps showed them the area where he was standing, and he described how Alicia opened the door slightly, and as Lexi was walking towards them, Phelps started shooting at the door. Alicia closed the door, and Phelps opened it and fired a few more shots. Kevin Lewis, who was already in jail on an unrelated charge, was arrested on charges of aggravated murder with a firearm, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder for the September 2017 death of Alicia Canales McGuire. In July 2020, Phelps, who was then 20, pleaded guilty to premeditated first-degree murder, and the court sentenced him to 31 years in prison. Hale, who was then 18, pleaded guilty to the same charge and got 15 years. Phelps testified at the trial that he had committed the crime for money and the street cred. He claimed he had spent the money Lewis paid him to get some tattoos, a pair of Timberland boots, and a Ferragamo belt buckle. He also claimed his former girlfriend had got the pistol from a family member. Lewis pleaded not guilty and faced a trial later that year. The prosecution said that he had paid $2,400 to his cousin and his girlfriend to get his ex-wife out of the way, turning them into teenage assassins. But in a tragic case of mistaken identity, it had been Alicia who had opened the door. Phelps said Lewis had directed them to the home, but claimed he didn't know who the target was, just the address. On the way back, Lewis handed Phelps an envelope of money after dropping Lewis back at his residence. Phelps and Hale returned to the location Lewis had pointed out, and Phelps fired the gun until it was empty, starting from his position near the garage, and fired the last couple after walking up to the front porch. The muzzle of the gun crossed the threshold. The last couple of shots were around the neck and head area. Phelps and Hale left in their car, but then returned because they believed they might have left a glove at the scene. When they returned, they saw police cars, so they turned around and left. They accessed GPS directions and drove back to Spokane. The defense argued that Lewis had never actually used the word kill when talking to his cousin and had simply said to get the target out of the way. But the prosecution reminded the court of Kevin's history of violence and the threats he'd made against Amanda. In November 2021, Lewis was found guilty of first-degree murder by a jury following a 6-week trial that lasted less than 3.5 hours. In January 2022, at the age of 34, Kevin was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. As part of the sentence, Judge Thompson prohibited Lewis from having any contact with his ex-wife, children, Phelps, and Hale for the remainder of his life. According to records, Lewis is currently serving his sentence at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla County. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jake Wagner. The case involving the crime against 8 members of the Roden family became one of the most notorious and complex in Ohio overnight. The motto "all for one and one for all" became fatal for each family member. Only the minor children were spared from the mass violence. The investigation spanned over 10 states in the USA. Detectives conducted more than 600 interviews, gathering around 700 witness statements. Various theories were considered, including self-harm, retaliation by illegal substance dealers, and cult sacrifices. Attorney General Mike DeWine even suspected local residents of withholding crucial information. It seemed the investigation had hit a dead end until a moment came when a solution lying on the surface became apparent. As it turns out, the most complex situations are often rooted in simplicity. This story illustrates how familial bonds turned into a bloodbath in Pike County, Ohio, USA. It all began with a simple crush. Hannah Mae Roden was 13 years old when she met 18-year-old Edward Jake Wagner. The young man invited her to the prom, and from that evening on, they were inseparable. Their relationship elicited mixed feelings. Undoubtedly, the love that blossomed between them was evident. However, the age difference raised concerns and doubts. Nevertheless, the young couple's parents did not obstruct their relationship, for they had all been young once. Over time, the Rodens and Wagners started spending weekends and parties together. Their love was passionate and carefree. When Hannah turned 15, she announced her pregnancy. Upon hearing the news, Jake was overjoyed. He anticipated how delighted his family would be with the new addition. The Wagners highly valued traditions and lineage, hence they adored children, as they saw the continuation of their lineage in them. Even ancestral names were passed down from generation to generation. Jake's father was named George Wagner III, and his brother George Wagner IV. The Rodens, on the other hand, had a simpler, less ostentatious approach to children, but this did not diminish their family values. Christopher and Dana Roden, Hannah's parents, remained very close and united even after their divorce. They loved their 3 children and dedicated their lives to their well-being. Unlike the Wagners, the Roden family had a modest income. 40-year-old Christopher worked as a handyman at the Big Bear Lake family complex, while 37-year-old Dana was a nurse's aide at a youth rehabilitation center. Nevertheless, they managed to instill humanity and diligence in Christopher Jr., Hannah, and Clarence Frankie. Everyone was thrilled about the arrival of little Sophie. To celebrate her birthday, a grand party was organized. Soon after, Jake suggested that Hannah move in with him and his family, arguing that it would make life more comfortable for both of them. His logic seemed sound, given that they were living in a house. However, Hannah declined the invitation. By that time, she had come to understand her partner better and saw the invitation as an attempt to limit her independence. Moreover, the once caring and attentive young man had become suspicious and aggressive. Jake had resorted to physical aggression on several occasions, and his rough behavior had cooled Hannah's feelings for him. Hannah's refusal became a point of contention for the Wagners. Both of Sophie's parents were determined to gain full custody of the girl, and the families began to advocate for their own interests. Driven by his desire, Jake went as far as to threaten Hannah, telling her that if necessary, he would take Sophie by force, claiming that if she truly loved her, she would have handed the girl over to be raised in a healthy environment. Jake believed that the Rodens posed a danger to Sophie, and these discussions continued for 2 years, during which he became more tyrannical. Hannah grew weary of the excessive control, and in March 2015, she completely terminated the relationship. Additionally, she had come to learn something disturbing. It transpired that Jake's brother, George IV, had obtained custody of a son by threatening the boy's mother with a weapon. This confirmed that the Wagners viewed moral and physical coercion as acceptable methods to safeguard their interests. Roden decided to distance herself from the situation. She wanted to raise her daughter alone while working as a nurse's assistant and finishing school. The situation worsened when everyone learned about Hannah's second pregnancy, although she claimed the child was from another man. Jake had his doubts and attempted to find out if she was seeing someone else. So in December 2015, he accessed her social media accounts, but found no evidence of infidelity. At the end of his investigation, he discovered that the woman was communicating with Georgia Ford's former mother-in-law, which piqued his genuine interest. A court case soon followed, during which the Wagner family repeatedly interacted with the woman. "They'll have to get rid of me before they can take custody of my daughter," Hannah wrote in her message. Jake shared the details of the correspondence with his family, which enraged them. "Then your maternal grandmother, Rita Newcomb, aged 65, forged an important document about custody. Furthermore, during a court session to determine the granddaughter's residence, Christopher Roden and George Wagner III had a serious disagreement. Ultimately, the relationship between the families completely deteriorated. Soon, a terrible idea occurred to the Wagner family. Hannah was so uncooperative that they felt the need to eliminate her, as well as the entire Roden family who could claim custody of Sophie. This insane thought turned into a monstrous plan that solidified by Christmas 2016. People's thoughts during the festive season are usually focused on love and creation, which cannot be said for the Wagner couple who organized a vote. It was decided whether they would implement their plan. All family members agreed, and the only thing left was to assign roles and prepare. 5 months were spent studying the Roden family's homes and surveillance cameras, with a particular focus on their daily routines and work schedules. Each person involved in the criminal plot had a specific role. For instance, Angela Wagner purchased sneakers for all family members to wear at a predetermined time, preventing the victims from seeking help. She also obtained a device to block communication, planning to secretly install it on the Roden family's phones to minimize noise. George III suggested making homemade silencers. He also arranged the transportation on the night of the crime, aiming to secure a van that would not draw attention. Sophie was to remain safe at home with Angela, as the court had granted Hannah and Jake joint custody of the child. The Wagners chose a time when it was their turn to look after the girl, meticulously planning every detail for a flawless execution. On the night of April 21, 2016, George Wagner III decided to visit Christopher Roden, allegedly to offer him a job opportunity that could improve his financial situation. The job offer was just a pretext to gain access to the house. Unsuspectingly, Roden Sr. opened the door on the morning of April 22, 2016. At about 8 p.m., Bobby Jo Manley, Dana Roden's sister, entered Christopher's house. She did this daily since the day he had offered her a job. Bobby took care of the animals belonging to the Roden family. She noticed someone was inside, which was unusual for that time when everyone typically went about their business. Inside the house, in a pool of blood, lay Christopher and 38-year-old Gary, his cousin. The men lived together. Horrified, she grabbed the phone and dialed emergency services, reporting what she had seen and requesting assistance at 477 Union Hill Road. Shocked, Bobby proceeded to the homes of other relatives. She knocked loudly on one of their doors, and soon, a 3-year-old boy, Clarence Roden's son, appeared. She asked him where his parents were, but the boy did not respond, only pointing towards the bed. Entering the house, she screamed at the sight of 20-year-olds Clarence and Hannah Hazel, his wife. The couple was deceased, with their 6-month-old baby stirring between them, alive but splattered with the blood of his parents. After Bobby's emergency call, the police immediately rushed to the specified address. As they approached the Roden family's property, they were stopped by a concerned neighbor, who urged them to check 2 more addresses where other family members resided. The neighbor's suspicion was correct, and in the 3rd house, the police discovered the bloodied bodies of the victims, 19-year-old Hannah, 16-year-old Christopher, and their relative Dana. Remarkably, the attackers had spared the life of Hannah's youngest child, a baby girl. Only a few days later, another victim was discovered, 44-year-old Kenneth, the elder Roden's brother, who lived a 15-minute walk from the others. By 2 p.m., 8 victims had been identified: Christopher, Dana, Clarence, Hannah, Hazel, Christopher Jr., Hannah Mae, Kenneth, and Gary. The only survivors were small children, a 3-year-old, a 6-month-old baby, and a newborn just 4 days old, along with 2-year-old Sophie, who was at the Wagner home at the time of the incident. After examining the bodies, the police concluded that all the victims had been killed in their sleep by gunshot wounds. Detectives later pieced together the events of that night. The patriarch of the family was awake when the attackers burst into the house, as evidenced by a wound on his right arm. Christopher attempted to defend himself, but was hit with 9 shots to the head, torso, and limbs. 5 bullets were removed from Dana Roden's neck and head, and the rest of the family was killed by gunshots to the head. Gary was shot 5 times, Christopher Jr. was shot 4 times, Clarence and his wife Hannah were shot 3 times each, and Hannah Mae was shot twice. Kenneth was the only one to be shot once. In total, the assailant fired 32 shots, some even after the victims had died. In addition, bruises were found on some of the bodies, indicating physical abuse. Since no one in the vicinity heard anything, investigators concluded that the perpetrators used silencers, suggesting a carefully planned and executed act. It was clear that the victims were not randomly selected. Someone wanted to take revenge on the entire family. During the search, the police found 5 Remington shell casings of different types and an unused bullet from a different model of gun. Leonard Manley, Dana's father, claimed that the criminals were familiar with the Rodens, or else the dogs would have been barking all over the place. The question of who committed such an act kept the police officers busy. The Attorney General's office provided more than $20,000 for the funeral of the Roden family. The deceased were interred in several stages on April 28, 2016. Gary was the first of the victims to be buried in South Shore, Kentucky, followed by Hannah Hazel, whose funeral was held on May 1st in the village of Atway, Coteau County, Ohio. The other victims were buried on May 3rd in West Portsmouth, in the same county. As for the fate of the surviving children, they were placed in the care of relatives. A wave of panic swept through the neighborhood, and the police urged the relatives of the Rodens to take necessary precautions and advised all residents of Pike to stay away from their homes at night. The cold-blooded mass murder outraged residents across the state, who demanded that the results of the investigation be made public and that the perpetrators be apprehended as soon as possible. Cincinnati businessman Jeff Ruby offered $25,000 for information that would help arrest and convict those involved in the murder, but he later declined the reward offer. No less than 100 individuals were part of the investigative task force working on the Roden case. Following the funerals, as part of the investigation, 3 houses belonging to the slain family were towed away the following day, and several more vehicles met the same fate, all transported to a secure facility. This was done to preserve evidence and protect the personal belongings of the deceased. After the investigation, the family's cars and farming equipment were planned to be returned to the victims' relatives. Forensic specialists joined the investigation, and the house were meticulously examined. However, no DNA of the suspects was found in any of them. Cameras had been installed in the mobile homes, but they too provided no information, as they had been disabled. Those who planned the crime had thought through every detail meticulously. It seemed there were no significant leads until detectives discovered something. Cannabis crops were found at 3 crime scenes in one location. There were about 200 plants. Officers believed the cannabis was grown for sale, not personal use, leading to speculation about the involvement of Mexican drug traffickers. However, the amount of cannabis found was too small to suggest an attack by an entire cartel. In January 2017, a close relative of the Roden family was arrested for drug trafficking, which was considered an unexpected circumstance. Leonard Manley stated that his daughter, Dana, had no involvement with the cannabis operations. "They're trying to tarnish Dana's reputation, and I don't like it," he asserted. Some family members confirmed that Christopher and Kenneth Roden, the older brothers, grew marijuana, but were unaware of any large-scale cultivation. The theory of a family feud over criminally obtained money was also debunked, alongside the discovery of prohibited substances, specialized equipment for breeding chickens for fighting, and cages with fighting equipment found at the Rodens' residence. It soon became clear that illegal fights were not the cause of the homicide. Months went by without uncovering the true motive behind the crime. On April 13, 2017, local authorities announced they lacked sufficient evidence to make any arrests. Nevertheless, prosecutor Rob Young stated the investigation was ongoing, suggesting they had some leads they were not yet ready to disclose. Another year passed, and the second anniversary of the mass crime received little attention, with no coverage in the local press, and neither the sheriff nor the prosecutor attending the memorial service. This led the community to believe the investigation had stalled. Unexpectedly, on May 12, 2017, a SWAT team raided a home in Pike County, located 10 miles from the crime scene. Their initial search was for suspects, but they later revealed that they were gathering evidence. Detectives also searched a house in Adams County that had previously been owned by Jake Wagner, though he had sold it by that time. On June 20th, 2017, the investigation publicly shifted focus to the Wagner family. 26-year-old Jake, 27-year-old George III, 47-year-old George IV, and 48-year-old Angela, who lived 15 miles from the victims. The Wagners had moved to Kali, Alaska, citing difficulties staying in the area. They claimed to have loved the Roden family, stating their deaths caused them immense suffering. Rob Young's words from a year earlier proved true, as the investigation had made a breakthrough and was now seeking information from the public on the Wagners' discussions about firearms, ammunition, vehicles, etc. 2 years prior. It wasn't long before the suspects, running low on funds, returned to Ohio, where detectives had gathered enough evidence for arrests, including proving that Jake had hacked into Hannah's account. During the examination of the Wagner family's devices, research related to guardianship was discovered. It was also found that Angela had purchased athletic shoes for the entire family just a few weeks before the crime, and the sole pattern of one of these matched the one found at one of the crime scenes. The officers believed that Angela was the mastermind behind the horrific scheme, with Jake as the primary executor. According to the investigation, each family member was involved in the criminal act. On November 13, 2018, the Attorney General announced the arrest of the Wagner couple, as well as their sons. They were charged with planning and carrying out the termination of life. Rita Newcomb, Angela's 65-year-old mother, and Frida Wagner, George III's mother, were also arrested. They faced charges of perjury and obstructing justice in 2019. Rita Newcomb underwent handwriting analysis, which proved her involvement in forging a guardianship document for Sophie. Later, to avoid imprisonment, she struck a plea deal. The charges against Frederica Vonner were dropped in June 2019, but the other Vonner remained incarcerated, having refused to cooperate with the investigation. They denied any involvement in the deaths of the Rodents and expressed sorrow over their passing, wishing for the real perpetrators to be caught. On April 22, 2021, 5 years after the tragic incident, Jake decided to make a deal with the prosecution. The agreement was that he would disclose details of the crime in exchange for all family members receiving life sentences instead of the death penalty. Vonner Jr. admitted to taking the lives of 5 out of 8 individuals, thus pleading guilty to 23 criminal charges, including 8 counts of aggravated crime. The remaining charges included burglary, conspiracy, illegal possession of dangerous ammunition, forgery of evidence and documents, interception of telegrams and oral messages, unauthorized use of property, obstruction of justice, involvement in corrupt activities, and unlawful intimate conduct with a young woman. He indicated that eliminating the mother was seen as the only way to secure custody of his daughter, and he felt compelled to do the same to the other family members, fearing they would seek vengeance and refuse to relinquish the girl. The next to stand trial was Angela on September 10th. She pled guilty to conspiracy to commit aggravated crime, robbery, and evidence tampering. She also agreed to testify against the other defendants. In exchange, the charge of ending a life was dropped, and she was sentenced to 30 years in prison. The trial of George Wagner's fourth began on August 28, 2022. The man denied any involvement in the crimes, insisting he was completely unaware. In contrast, the prosecution argued that he participated in planning, executing, and concealing the crimes. Ultimately, George IV was found guilty on 22 counts and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The trial for George III is scheduled for February 2024. Despite his entire family being convicted, he continues to